in December. It's gonna show very long. This year. Yeah, it's this year.
I'm a part of a different team.
Oh.
I'm hiking in Spain in August.
Everybody's doing far cooler things than me.
Yeah.
I am looking forward to spending time with my grandson in California. The best.
I'm looking forward to my daughter's graduating next month and we're doing a little vacation down the same shore.
I'm gonna give one in the past. We got back a couple weeks ago from Harry Potter World with a 9, 6, and 2-year-old with the wands and the whole thing. And they had the time of their life and they said, Dad, let's move to Florida. Yeah.
Cargo Tuesday for me.
I'm looking forward to our conversation on scrap program.
Oh, yes. Great, thank you so much, Hazel and Renee. All right, so, on the agenda next, we have Utah Association of Special Districts. However, there was a little bit of a communication issue, so we are going to switch around, 3.3 and 3.5. So we're gonna move ahead to talk about, public perception of WFWRD. So what I'd like everybody to do is if you don't have a pen or pencil, there's a stack, you can pass them around. So first I'd like everybody to, on their, on their, sticky notes, write down, and this is everybody, board, staff, well, organization. What you think we're, have that. I think being a teacher for 20 years, I would have better memory and don't worry. That's the way it goes. All right, so after you get a chance to write down, what you thought you do well, why don't you take a minute, on a different sticky note, and write down what you think some of the perceptions that the public has of us. They can be good, they can be bad, concerns they might have, and then also cities. And we know sometimes relationships with cities can be a little bit different than the public. Sometimes they overlap. So what are some of the perceptions that you run into, that you hear, what people are calling in, when they're complaining, that you see about what we're, also in that category, areas where we might be misunderstood or invisible, like not acknowledged or not seen for what we're doing. So take a minute and write those down.
One thing on each individual note.
Doesn't matter right now. Okay, so now after you have a chance to write those down, what I'd like you to do is somebody, next to you, if you would like to get up, I think it would be really great to have staff and board members, discuss with each other as well, but also to have different municipalities share some of these same things, because some of the, perceptions that we see are different in different municipalities. So take a few minutes and discuss with somebody next to you both of these things. Things that you think that we're doing well, things that we are successful at, and then also concerns or perception issues that we might be dealing with the public. So everybody get take a few minutes to talk.
So. Okay. It says. So. What is your? What would you like?
I said, I'll stress something. I said, I'll never pay knowledge.
Yes.
When we did it for some centers, well, it was right.
Not a lot. So I put rely on the. But now, things that. In bars.
Yeah.
On their. I guess, 2 hours.
Yeah. And we tried to do it a lot of, you know. Yeah.
On the perception side, going on more negative. Things I hear is what I pass on. I never hear from any. Hey. So the only one that we can, it is.
Okay, so let's come back here.
I
So
want.
let's talk as a group. We're gonna find this. So what are some things that we believe are doing well?
Reliable. You put your can out, it gets picked up without fail.
All right, so here's something I have to say that I was do. I believe strongly that being able to spell well is genetic, and I do not have it. That's why I switched over to PowerPoint many years ago, because the number of times I embarrassed myself. So call me out if I spell something wrong. Trust me. I've done it enough times, it does not faze me. Okay, so we're reliable. We get the track record, it's done. What else? What else are we doing?
It's a wide coverage area.
Okay, wide coverage area. And this is not working. Okay. What else?
Communication.
Okay. When you say communication, what do you mean?
Well, I liked how I would always get updates and mailers in regards to when the Sprout program was happening, how to do the reservations and everything like that, and it's kind of continued into this role, but really, the communication has just been
Very great.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's good. Okay. What else?
App and website development.
Sorry, say that again.
App and website development.
Soon.
Is there an app?
Yes, and it's so cool because I was putting in something to find out if I could recycle it, and we'll tell you if you can recycle it or not.
It'll give you your dates, the recycle things, the scrap program.
Is that
sort?
Is there a?
The beer tax days, all of
I didn't
it.
know we had a flyer on that.
Yeah.
You gotta cross off community with it. Fun and back.
Well, this is the gap, right? They do it well, but then there might be a misinterpretation on it.
And on the website, it actually.
Yeah, okay. Put that over here.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other things that we do well?
I think, and whether this, and I'm sure some public sees this, but I do appreciate, especially as a new member, how really a team and a staff that cares. Like, I've been really impressed with being able to see. Maybe it's that they care, but take real pride in it as well.
I would agree with that. Along with this, I feel like, I mean, the basic job is like, our trash and recycling get picked up, and that happens I mean, that's just what happens, like I mean, I think it goes back to reliability too, right? Like, we're doing what our mission is, we're accomplishing our mission.
I think Warford can think outside the box, they can be nimble, and creative with the service. Most companies can't do that.
Okay. All right, this is the part where we get all of the complaints. So what do you feel like, was the public perception, good, it could be bad, place that we hear? Yeah, Matt?
I was telling the group earlier, the only people that reach out, of course, don't call and say, hey, the price is great, thank you so much.
Sure.
So for me, it really is, hey, it's too expensive, or I want a different type of service, is kind of the two.
So let's dig into that just a little bit, type of service. So when people are asking for different types of services, what are they asking? What are they asking for?
Well, I think it should vary some things. There are some that say, maybe they would want recycling every other week. Or there's some that say wish glass was included,
Glass.
or I wish, curbside pickup, for other, that's a definite one that I get reached out to. So it's just, look, it's what we do and planned on are reliable, it's just other opinions on wanting to do it differently.
Okay,
I want those things at the same cost.
yeah,
Or I want to pay for recycling.
oh, at all. So-
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I get
Okay,
it.
that's good.
all right,
So along with that, is that people consider it a basic function, right? It's not a premium service. It's not something that people feel like, on board, so I should be able to put my trash out on the curb and that's what goes away. And that's just because I'm a citizen of the United States of America. So it's considered a basic function, not something that people see the surface value of. This is back to the building.
Here we go, good luck.
Okay, we'll work on those things. We're close to that.
Mandatory evacuation for West Bountiful within, looks like a gas leak is my house.
so,
Can I also say what we do well on?
Yeah.
So I showed the cool spreadsheet that we got last meeting to the other people on the council, and they were like, wow, they do a lot for what this be. Because only 1/3, if that, of Murray is on Woodford, it's like a urban annex however many years ago. And the rest, is of Murray's on a different system, and they're like, wow, we got top of our public works and up our game, so we're, comparable to the rest of the Woodford part of Murray.
you feel
So,
like it's good value.
yeah, that's the perception of my other council members. I'm new, so I'm like, it's good to me.
And
And
that one civil services part of that.
Yeah.
For us, trailer program, very important.
So here is for the perception,
Well, part of the services that we were writing out, recycling.
Oh. trailer program, okay.
I think it goes with the basic service that you were just describing and the value, because a lot of times the perception from the residents is they want all of that at the same cost. They want all of those things that you took off, like put off to the side, all at the same cost. But maybe it's kind of communication, basic service and value are kind of going right in the middle. Because I think we understand it, but I don't know what the greatest method of getting the residents to understand it. So it's kind of right there in the middle.
So you're leading exactly to this, so look at the gaps between what we're doing well and what our perceptions are. Like, how do we identify those gaps? Is it a service gap? Do we need to change the services? Is it a communication gap that we need to let people know about what our app is? Like, how are we identifying what those gaps are? Yes.
just one more for the do better one. I think, and it's maybe a communication or a perception thing. But at the Utah League of Cities and Towns that we were just at, I heard somebody say in passing, they were talking about special districts, saying, oh, I don't know if they're necessary anymore, like the open market, do all the things, and there's plenty of competition, so like a perception that's not a like special districts is not a necessary thing in Utah anymore. And, that wasn't the first time I heard something like that, and so, I mean, that might be a misperception of people why it's important to have a special district like.
Okay, so the perception might be that we're unnecessary. Okay. All right, so let's move on to the gap. So let's look here. So the app being unknown, where's the gap in there between what we've thought we're doing? Because this app's pretty great. Like I was looking up, can I recycle like a strawberry like container? And it would tell me like, you can recycle it. So I was like, okay, that's cool. And so that, but nobody knows about it. So how do we identify some of these gaps here? Like communication problem, it's a service problem. What do we think?
I think there is a communication piece, and I know, like, Katerina does a good job of reaching out to our PIO and our communications team, but for the most part, you're relying on the cities to share it, right? But I for sure got your email this week about my payment process. Do you know what I mean? So who are we missing? Is there a gap in communication? Because I think that's an issue that cities have as well. I know we're always talking about how are we actually reaching people? And so how do we reach everyone when the cities aren't even reaching everyone?
Well, that's the thing too, right? It's like, if we weren't involved in city government, how often would you really be looking at your city's website or following them on social media or any of those things? Like I wasn't involved in any of that before I started becoming involved in the city government.
We have a communication issue in the sense that, and we might be unique because only the third or fourth authority is on Woodford. And so we can't just, we can't just say in our newsletter, this is what Woodford's doing. It just confuses people because people are, so wait, do I live in this area? Do I live in that area? And so any new change we do, it's hard to message out because.
So I think that's important for Woodford to keep in mind, because if we're relying on the cities to communicate that information, and some of the cities don't feel like they can just communicate it to all their residents, so maybe at Woodford, we need to look at other avenues to make sure that that information is getting out, because for a lot of good reasons, you can't just like disseminate it like universally.
That may just be us then, so maybe. No.
Yeah.
I want to put under a gap, telling our story,
Okay.
which is maybe a subset of communication. A huge prompts to Evan for coming in and turning over every stone and looking at every single way that we can make improvements. We had this discussion earlier this year during the session of just how do we handle this going forward, but telling our story, and that's kind of, I'm going to put that gap on board members. I believe it's our job to actually tell the story to our colleagues and to our residents. For instance, Keith just mentioned this. He got our newsletter for Cottonwood Heights, and on the front page, every council member gets a turn. And during my turn, I talked about the trash district, and I talked about how, look, over this next year, we're going to do everything we can to be as competitive as we can, because on these community forums, the people that take over are talking about it's too expensive, kind of the more negative side. The neighborhood forums, they're all talking about the negative. But if we don't tell the story about how we're rolling up our sleeves and really trying to make a difference, that will help residents be a little more patient and let things kind of unfold and improve. And if we don't say that though, they're just gonna be ticked. And so that gap I put on us as board members. We have to do that.
No, I like that. I appreciate that, because so often in those settings, people just kind of get on a high horse about something and it just kind of goes downhill.
Yeah.
So changing that narrative, I think, is incredibly important. Yes, Tessa.
So to kind of expand on that, in our meetings, we have liaisons for each of these boards that we have members on. And so every month at our meetings, we always take specific amount of time on our agenda to actually have the liaison. I'm liaison obviously for Woodford. And we take the time to explain what has happened at each monthly meeting, any new changes, any big upcoming things like the app or scrap program or postcards that are going out. We post the newsletter that you send. I don't have social media, but I have somebody on the council who does. So I have them post it to all the different areas people look in our town. And then we do have it posted to our website. So usually after each meeting, we actually talk with our recorder right then and say these things need to be added to the website now, so that that information is actually going up in time. It seems to work for our community, but
Yeah, that's great.
an example.
No, I think that's really great, and I like the idea of combining that with what Matt is saying about making sure that we're communicating that value that we're getting, which leads me to kind of the point that I think we all hear, is value versus expense. This idea is this is a basic service, they want their trash picked up, or we have all of these other services that are more premium, and how do we look at that? Yeah, are we hearing that, when people say it's too expensive, are they saying it's too expensive compared to what? Compared to West Valley City, compared to, the private market, where are we hearing now? We're hearing it, residents, what are you hearing?
I think what we've got going on right now is we've got a very active private market that's actually making that statement locally. They're interested in coming in, they're interested in presenting to local cities, they're interested in presenting to local towns. And they're asking for that opportunity. They believe they can do it cheaper. They're getting in the ear of local leaders and local parties, not just local leaders. And that is where a lot of this is coming from. If you're not aware of that, you need to be aware of that. And so, I mean, I've heard it multiple times. I've heard it at conferences now. I've heard it at a lot of different things where you don't need government to do this. Private industry can do this for cheaper. I don't know why you allow bureaucracies who are expensive and stuff to do this. We can do it way cheaper. But what people don't understand is what actually happens when that happens. And so there's a historic, it's an interesting thing to follow it historically when that happens, and you can actually see it, it cycles, right? When the private industry comes in, they underbid every single time. They underbid for a period of time and then they jump it up, and you end up paying more long term. Because they can't, the costs are the same, right? They pay the same landfill costs, they pay the same other costs, and they take it out in other ways where they have cost savings and your services actually go down. And so it's really interesting when you actually look and compare private industry to local. There's a lot who believe it's cheaper to go to private industry, but in actuality, you lose services. It's a balance of, do you want local control for your cities? Do you want to be able to have a say? Or do you want to go to private industry where you have zero say in your services? They can change it on a whim, and your contracts are year to year. I mean, that's really what you're getting into. And so I'm helping the public understand, what are your services you want to be on where you have a say, because you're a part owner in a special district. You actually have a say in what's going on, what your services are. You have a say in how that service is going to happen. You have a say in pricing. You have a say in all those things because you have a say in the budget. Versus private industry where you're just signing a contract and hoping they don't screw you in the end, right? They don't understand that cost, the difference between those two things. And you know, I worked with special districts for many, many years. I've seen it cycle through, and you've seen people leave, you've seen people come back, right?
Just a quick comment to piggyback on what Lori has talked about. They are at every chamber meeting. They are our competitors, and I am a free market person. I own my own business. I understand when government gets involved in business, that's not always the best route to go. But the fear is that there really isn't a lot of competition out there. And if we jump ship and leave this one, whether we're government sponsored, government bureaucracy, whatever you want to call it, we are the competition to the private market out there. And if we leave, that leaves just them. And one thing that I have said over and over to the people in Taylorsville, we have a voice at the table. And with our competitors, we're not going to have a voice at the table. And they have made it abundantly clear. Sometimes they don't know who I am at meetings. They just think I'm with Taylorsville. And they've made it very clear, I'm coming after your business. What can we do? So, you know, I think today's really important because I want to see competition in the market for garbage collection. And I like the way Woodward runs, and I like the services, and I think it's a good deal, and so does Taylorsville.
So,
I love
So I want to just make sure I'm summarizing what I'm hearing here. So when we're talking about value versus expense, a lot of what I'm hearing to identify this gap really is in some ways a communication gap. Because people are focusing on money and then kind of and private sector, but what we're really saying is we're offering competition which is what they're really wanting, and we're also offering a voice at the table so that their representatives can be involved in making those decisions on pricing and on services so that they can then have a voice. Does that feel like a good, okay, Matt and then Nick.
Yeah, so Sandy City uses waste management. Part of it obviously uses the districts here, and you'll get people that will post and compare Sandy and Conway Heights, very, very common on many different levels. And, you know, they will say that it's just cheaper, right? And having been on the board for a couple of years, I've been able to use a bunch of different approaches and see what works. And to be honest, the one that is getting most people to just stay calm and calm down and trust the process is just when I'm just blunt with them, and it's what I said in my article, is over this next year, we're going to look at XXX. Over the last year, we've done XXX. If after a year from now, we are not more competitive with the marketplace, then we're gonna have a problem. Because I think, let's just be clear, you know, Harriman's on the call, and I actually had a conversation with Mayor Palmer, and I said, hey, you know what the best thing would be for Harriman? Is for the district to actually be pretty healthy. Because it then keeps competition in the marketplace, which then helps those that frankly have gone to the private market. And so, for me, instead of trying to explain the local control argument, which it works with some it's just too nuanced. It is a dollar amount, it is that simple, and we have got to be more competitive. But in that, the only way that we're gonna be able to pull this off, so thank you for the wonderful gentlelady from Taylorsville, for mentioning all of those great things, is we have to all band together and give it our best shot that over this next year, we are going to create a better district that is more competitive, more responsive to our residents, which then they're not going to want to leave. But if we just say, well, we do this and they don't do this, we do the tree pickup and they don't do that, the majority of people, you've lost them, it's done, and they're just upset that it's too expensive.
Okay, no, I think you got a really good point there, Nick.
I think it's incredibly important to underscore what Lori said, that people don't feel like they're have partial ownership in this, then they're not going to listen to any of those arguments. All they're gonna hear is somebody say, I can do it for you cheaper. And it goes to what Matt's saying as well, but I think the communication has to have at least a kernel of how are people invested in this themselves. You show them that they're owners of this, and if somebody is trying to take away what it is they have, the access, the seat at the table, and a voice in what those decisions are, that's the only way you're gonna get people to really be. Again, just want to underscore what Hunter said, showing ownership is really, really important.
I agree with that as well. But, yes.
Oh, I just was thinking that, you know, there was like this video, like a short video that kind of highlighted some of the great things that Woodward does, and then, but just also told the story of why it's important to have a special district. I mean, if you think about it, like combined, we're like a really, really big city with a lot of purchasing power, but individually, we can't really have necessarily the same effect, right? And so like, I feel like, you know, like any marketing piece, like something where we could reach people, something quick and easy, but then like explain why, you know, what it's talking about, why it's important to have this in the marketplace.
So where do you think the responsibility for this communication lies? I think Matt identified that to some degree, like, board members going back to our cities and our city councils, using the opportunities that we have in our journals is incredibly important. What else can we do to, so it sounds like what we're saying, first of all, is this idea of ownership, I think is key for a lot of people. And then the second idea, we're gonna miss. We've got this one. And maybe the best way to summarize what Matt is talking about as far as pricing is, but it's also like pricing and efficiency. Like we're trying to be the most competitive with the services that we're offering. Competition, competitiveness.
And just to be clear on that, Emily, I think when I first got on the board, we actually didn't talk too much about actually being competitive. It was more about when I went through orientation, was look at all the great things we do, right? But that clearly hasn't worked for some communities. And so I think we just had, I think Evan, frankly, is the one that did this, was we're gonna have to be more competitive. And I love when I shared at my council meeting recently, the fact that you can pay for a pickup of a fridge or a washer. You would be surprised how many people were so excited about that. And I actually used an experience, I called 1-800-JUNK before this was offered, and it was super expensive to pick up a single fridge. And people reached out and said, how do I do this? This is super cool. It's a great advantage. And those are real tangible things, but we have to communicate that.
I think maybe the language we use needs to change, because one of the things people don't understand is that they are owners. Special districts is made up of a boundary, and every person that lives in the boundary owns a piece of the special district. And that really is what it comes down to. We're not a bunch of cities that are members of the district. We are a boundary, and we are representatives of those boundaries that live in that district, which is why you have some cities where only partially part of that. That's the beauty of special districts, is they were started as those who owned those services and wanted to start that district. So I think maybe having people understand that maybe we gotta quit calling them residents. Maybe we need to call them special district owners or like investors or whatever they are, but we need to talk about who they are really differently. And maybe that's the language we need to change. Because technically, they're owners of this district.
Stakeholders.
I only have one concern about that.
Yeah.
That in any form of government, not just this one, residents don't have ownership in that when they leave, they get some sort of equity payout.
Understood.
And that's been a contention recently, so I really want to make that clear because we don't believe that that's the case.
Understood, but again, they're in the boundary.
Yeah, that's,
They've chosen to do this, which gives them that kind of say.
yes,
Do-
from a philosophical standpoint, yes.
Yeah. So there needs to be a way to be able to communicate that. Yeah.
Just to consider the broader perspective too, we're one of many different special districts, and we all face many of the same challenges. And I think it'd be really important to consider what those other special districts are doing, how they're managing these issues. And a lot of us have roles in those other districts too. So just to keep in mind, we're not going this alone. There's a lot of other organizations that are going to face the same pressures. How can we capitalize on what each other?
That's actually something I was thinking, so, because I'm sure we're all starting budget season right now. And every budget season, especially after a new election, we have new members on our city council. We have, so we're part of UFA and UPD, and we have our police chief and our fire chief come in, and they essentially do a whole presentation about the value that they offer for our city. And it's very detailed, and they go into just a lot of detail about why their service is beneficial to our community. That's something that I thought of, and I know that Evan has been doing an excellent job of going around to cities and doing the same thing, but I'm wondering if that's something that we need to do more regularly or have on a regular rotation as far as like right before budget season when we're having to make these kind of decisions. And I know UFA, if any of you guys are a part of UFA, they do, they have fire school. Does anyone know fire school besides me? Awesome. Highly recommend fire school. But it was very compelling as far as making UFA's case for value, and they had some specific asks, and they were able to demonstrate this is why we need X, and by burning stuff up, and how it was better to, have a thing. And then I know when I got on this board, it was helpful for me. We went to the recycling plan and we walked around. I don't know if anyone has had the chance to do that as well, but maybe that's something that we need to offer to our councils, is to invite not just members of the board out, but members of the city councils out to see the different services that we're providing and kind of give them a more in-depth experience. That's just something that I thought of what Nick was saying.
That's where Clark had the idea of having like a video or some type of, something we can use multimedia, so that in your absence, we have something else that can be shared, whether it's only Woodward's website, whether it's also on the app, whether it's on all of our websites, however that would work for your city. But having that in conjunction, so in addition, because I'm sure, I don't know if you have the time to come to every council meeting every month to make sure that that's done in person. And we have an incredibly small population, so most of the people are listening to the recording or seeing the minutes rather than being there in person, so it's just another way to.
Well, and Tess, if there was a video, I probably would know that there was an app. Somewhere, and I clearly haven't read it.
Right? Well, and
So
there.
people take information differently.
Yeah, and like in our mailer, for example, I mean, a lot of you use the MSD, so when they do the bulletins, we actually added that into ours as well for our particular town, so that we could have the app there and all the different things for Woodward, so that people were at least getting the information secondary to Facebook or Instagram or just doing it on their own. So
it sounds like what we're saying as far as like action items or ways to address these, first of all, is what Evan's already started doing is attending the council meetings for all of our different municipalities, and then also inviting councils to visit Woodward in some capacity, to see what we're offering and see the different services that we're provided, and then also media. Is there anything else that we want to, yes?
I think it would be worth exploring at least the cost benefit versus the cost or benefit of hiring some expertise to look at the case and to figure out the best way to fill those gaps, to communicate those gaps to people. And maybe there are professionals here in influence and media campaigns, things like that. I just think it would be worth seeing what it would cost to hire that expertise to figure out how we can reach these people.
That is a very good question.
And I have no idea. What the answer
I don't either, but you don't know unless you look.
Right, it's worth asking.
Yeah, very much. Yeah.
I think the other thing we need is we need ambassadors. And one way to get ambassadors is the same thing that UFA and these others do, is to maybe have a trash and recycling citizen school, right? Where they come, they learn, and they become ambassadors for communities.
Well, that's what I'm thinking with like council visits coming to Woodward, and I don't know what that looks like what trash school looks like. I mean, there's nothing as cool as like putting out your own fire, like with fire school.
I don't know, I always wanted to be able to, dump a truck, do that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't know. Well, they figure out Parks and Recreation, right? Something like that, right? Where people are experiencing what we're involved in. So I like that idea as well.
Because an idea of a citizen school where we can bring anybody from the community, not just the leaders, I think that's important.
So I have one thing to add to it. I love this idea. Please don't get me wrong, but whenever we have things like this that we're adding, great idea on having somebody with the professional background to look at these and see what the most like beneficial way demographically is to get the information out. Love it. Having the community involved, having council members involved, love it. But then we also have something that keeps coming up on things that the residents don't like, and that's cost. So anytime we have more involvement, more studies, more times that people can come out and see recycling, stuff like that, we also have to consider the amount of time and money that's being put into it. And we have to make sure that we have a good explanation of where that's coming from, how it's being used, because when they see fee increases, those are gonna be the first things they want eliminated.
And Tessa, that's why, that's the most powerful thing is for us to actually speak.
Yes.
Because we are the ones who they have selected as a source to represent for information. I mean, we all get calls, hey, what's happening with taxes, what's happening with this, what's happening with the police? I saw a fire here, what's happening, that happens everywhere.
Exactly.
We are already built into the structure to be able to communicate, but we have to tell the story.
If we can get that information first and make sure that that is super transparent and explained ahead of time, I think these types of things are very easy to move forward with. But I just wanted to make sure that gets noted, that that's gonna be the number one thing people are gonna ask, because they already aren't aware. So they're in the dark, and the very first thing they're gonna think of is money, cost. Especially if right now they aren't understanding all of the benefit, they're not going to, if we're like, hey, but we have this and this and this going, they're gonna automatically assume those things are tied to their fees.
It's true.
Finding a way to separate those and adequately communicate them before we do those types of things is really, really important.
So with all of this, I think looking at cost is key. Making sure that we're trying to reach out, we're trying to increase our communication. Also not hoping that Evan has, like 8 arms and trying to like be a one-man show and running everything. Not that he doesn't have an amazing team here, but I know, and I've talked with Evan, and they are all operating at 110% these days with all of these new initiatives that we have going on. And so we need to be conscious of, we don't want to burn anybody out, because we just really appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Just one note, sort of talk about cost, is that, Pam had put it out in different formats. A lot of the cities that are using other services, that they actually offset part of the public super costs. So what the public doesn't see, oh, I'm gonna pay this, the only reason you're paying that is because the city contributed X funds from the general fund in order to keep that cost low. So it's not so we do a comparison, just looking at the displayed number, you don't know the back end of that number.
I would say that it's not as much that we lose, it's just really difficult to make a direct comparison because of that.
Yes, sorry. Taylorsville, you guys did an excellent job at a board meeting recently. I remember listening back at it, and your staffer who actually did a comparison did a fantastic job of showing part of their property tax is paying for this, which is why it's less expensive for the homeowner, when in reality, it's not. And I think water has the same issue in the state of Utah being compared to other states, because states like Nevada will use water, then they clean it up and put it back into the system. And therefore, it looks like they're using a different number than Utah does, because we don't put the amount of water that we're sending down the Jordan River that's clean back into our numbers. And so they're not comparing apples to apples, and it looks bad. So that really is a communication thing that Taylorsville City did. I don't know if the other cities have, I just haven't listened to your meetings, but your specific board meeting where your staffer explained it was
Really helpful.
really
A
helpful.
lot of work.
And
excellent.
So even if your cities don't do a direct comparison, even being able to take numbers like what Taylorsville did and using that when you're talking to your city councils, I think would go a long way. So great job, Taylorsville.
I appreciate that. So it sounds like what we're seeing is obviously there's a lot more that we need to communicate. I mean, I think internally, we're doing a lot to make sure that we're offering the best service at a competitive price. And then externally, it looks like what we're trying to do is make sure that, as Matt said, that we're telling our story. Because I think, as Anna said, like, our story is pretty great. We offer a lot of services. Looks like what we're gonna be talking about today is dialing in and making sure that our services are the best. And making sure that we're really making our story easy to tell so that people want to stay with the district because what we provide is so great. And I think it is. So it's just kind of about connecting those dots together. All right, I think we are done with this piece unless anybody has anything else they want to add overall. Yes, Evan.
I would just say I appreciate all the open, candid feedback, and this is exactly what we wanted in this discussion. We want to hear what's good, what's bad, what's the misperception, what's the good, bad, and the ugly. We had a theme song joke that we were talking about as part of this discussion. And, one thing I've been really focusing on in communicating, presenting to the various councils and several new board members that we have this year is what board member Holton mentioned is telling our story, telling the district story that we are a sole enterprise fund. A few things that I've been emphasizing to our respective partner cities is that what we do as an organization we don't ask for any resources from our partner cities. So there's no contract management, they're not having to deal with the billing, the account changes, any sort of collections for payments that are being made and things like that. So that comparison and that part of the story is critically important. And so UFA and UPD coming to various cities, they're asking for monies from that city's purse, their general funds. Woodford is not doing it. Everything that we do is entirely funded from the fees that we collect, which is limited by nature of our design of only collecting up to 4 lakhs in most cases. That's part of the other discussion as well today, but there are other services that we're providing beyond basic trash and recycle collection that are above and beyond what a typical waste collection provider would provide in cases as well. So understanding what those are and are there different funding mechanisms? Is there a different model possibly for that? I'm not suggesting that there is, but just that part of the story and understanding that everything we're doing, including the leaf bag program, including managing our website, including our billing and sending out those bills, et cetera, so on and so forth. It's all funded from those user fees. There's no other monies coming into the system.
I think that's really important to keep in mind as we go back and share a story. Thank you very much. All right. So we are going to switch gears just a little bit. We really appreciate LeGrand coming, UASD, Utah Association of Special Districts, and talking to us. We're going to switch gears and get started while I clean up this.
Good. Thank you. What would you like me to be? Would you like me to be in the center of the Coliseum?
I think you're gonna be seen better.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Well, it's great to be among friends. We're having really fun ourselves, but I'll think quite a bit. It doesn't come from like we're in a place of eating, it's not occasion, but it's nice to be with you today. Appreciate the discussion that's gone on. Please go ahead. You bet. There's a see you again. Maybe just a little story. A couple of months ago, I got a call from a citizen up in northern Utah, Weaver County, asking some questions about how can they create a district. Well, we just ended a session where Heather and I just had a lot of fun dealing with questions and issues about districts and some pushback from some legislators who are relatively newly elected, and it comes up periodically where they have questions about districts and why they need them, kind of thing. So this citizen called and said, how do we create a district, and talk about a few things and got into the weeds about what they're dealing with. It kind of gets back to Laurie's comments a few minutes ago. In this case, it was a water company. They're served by a private water company, and they're really upset. Why? Because they aren't invited to the meetings. They can't go to the meetings. They're closed. They can't get copies of minutes. They can't listen in. They have no input on the pricing. All of this is done by a private water company. And so they have no feedback, as Lori and others have mentioned. And so they want to actually create a district in order that they might have the statute, the state statute that will protect them, allow them to go and attend these meetings, have input on the costs, actually be elected to a board and have feedback. So it's just interesting to see the contrast and the push and pull that we sometimes experience, and appreciate your feedback here. Maybe just a couple of observations on some of the discussions that went on, which I think were excellent. Some questions about what can we do. There was a legislative audit that was done, it's been 15 or so years ago, and some feedback that came from the legislature on some things that boards can do in order to more effectively operate. And one of those, in other words, it was an area where they found that some political subdivisions in the state of Utah were not doing, whether it be districts or cities or counties, whatever. And the recommendations that were given by the legislative auditor were for the board to establish performance criteria, for example. And if you have those things clearly laid out, which you do have those, I'm sure, but maybe continuing to think in that area when you think about communications for people, is it would be well to polish some of our performance criteria? What are the goals and objectives of the board? And that expands to what are the goals and objectives of the citizens? Once you have those performance criteria laid out, then management has an idea or a clear idea as to what information they need to have for the board every month. That information can be easily sent out to the citizenry in a variety of ways. And just kind of maybe polishing, if that would be helpful, on the performance criteria and having it just be something that doesn't have to be recreated again to go to the public, if you understand what I'm saying. Some of those items might be high level for the board, and others might be changed a little bit in order to go to the public. It's just a continual flow of feedback to them. That was some interesting feedback, I think, from the legislative auditor general. Some things that we have seen over time, which you already may be doing, that are helpful for districts, particularly where they serve multiple cities and counties, is to have the cities and counties have links on their website that are clearly accessible. Not something they have to drill for and dig for, but it's just somehow right there on their home page. A lot of cities have that, and counties. Some it may be helpful to kind of make that more apparent. And there's some other things we can talk about as leaving the head, and Heather has a lot of ideas and expertise in that regard as well. I've been working with Central Utah Water Conservancy District and dealt with a lot of issues. One other item that I'll talk about just briefly about the function of district throughout in the state. A number of years ago, when I worked for a very large district, we had, as is sometimes common, some people were very happy with the service, but there were some that were not, for whatever reason. So we decided to create some committees that were focused in certain areas, whether it be budget finance or government operations or citizen groups. And we would invite in the proper circumstances and situations, some of these individuals who raised a lot of concerns, and we involve them on these committees. And the majority of the time, over the space of 4 or 5 or 6 months, began to change and become supporters of what we were doing. They were involved, kind of an ad hoc committee where there might be a board member or two and some staff, but inviting some of these citizens as well to come in and give feedback. That helped us in improving our performance. It also helped us in educating some key people in the community who seem to have some real communications going on. But that always works successfully. There are those that might be activists where it becomes a little bit difficult. We did have a couple of those, and that was challenging. But the overall outreach to others and involving them in these committees was extremely positive, and we ended up turning a lot of folks that supported what we were doing. So just a couple of items just to consider. Districts, why in the world are they created? And if I'm going the wrong direction, if you just kind of plug it right. Ben Franklin is my understanding, is the person created the first district. It was the fire district. Do you remember what he did with lightning rods? Well, yeah, it's because of fire and lightning. So they created the first fire district back east, Pennsylvania or somewhere. That was the beginning. What kind of drives districts? You're familiar with this, I think. It is a situation where a city or a county is either unable or unwilling to provide the service. And the citizens want the service. And so they have some vehicle to get the service. Before districts, which as you know, are political subdivisions of the state of Utah. Before that was the case, there really wasn't a vehicle without a city or a county to provide that service, or unwilling to do so. So that's really where districts came into being. In addition to wanting the service, there are a number of situations which you're somewhat familiar with as well in your setting, that drive district creation, and that is achieving economies of scale and efficiencies. That's critical. In this particular environment of solid waste, back in the, just a quick example, it would be in the late 70s, early 80s, EPA passed a rule called Subtitle D, which affected solid waste in a big way. It essentially said, all your little landfills and dumps, if you will, or burn piles. I don't know if you kind of remember the burn barrels in your backyard when you were young. I used to go out, carry it out with a little guy in the 60s and put a thing and light it, and that was smoke coming out. Landfills were the same way, or dumps at that point in time. We just go and push it over the hill and light it on fire, and it was this eternal burn. Well, EPA came out and said, those have to be closed by a certain date, and if you're not closed by this date, you, city, have complete responsibility for eternal care of that facility and remediation. And that kind of got everybody's attention, straightened their back a little bit. So by that date, there were in Davis County, Morgan County area, 15 cities and counties that joined into a district in order to avoid all these little entities having liability for everything that's going on and achieve economies of scale. The NIMBY thing was happening. We didn't want it in their backyard. So they had one facility they all worked together on. Were there disagreements? Absolutely. There were challenges and difficulties that occurred, but they worked it out because they wanted to achieve these economies of scale and so forth. And so that's some of the driving. You want the service, you want to achieve economies of scale. You're familiar with different types of districts. I won't get into detail on that. You have migrated to a special district, which is totally independent, and you're familiar with that. Do you have any particular questions about districts? I just asked the question, and I'll keep talking. If you do interrupt me or raise your hand, but just to give you some time to think for just a minute. Boards, as you know, board members have a responsibility to represent the interests of the district when they're appointed or elected to a board. They have a fiduciary responsibility to represent the best interests of the district. Sometimes that's challenging. We've seen that before, where you're appointed by a city perhaps, and you do have responsibilities with respect to that city and the citizens that you represent, but collectively, when you come together, it's representing the best interests of all the citizens. Do you have any particular questions or concerns with respect to a district, how they function, how they best represent the citizens? Any concerns about things we've experienced? You're happy with it?
Completely happy. I said everyone's completely happy.
Oh, good, yes. Well,
I think you got a question over here.
yes.
Yeah, I think that it's very easy for districts to be a punching bag for interests.
Yeah.
The existential threat to special districts is something that is not going away anytime soon. And that is a concern to me, not what districts do, but rather what people think districts do and that perception. I mean, how do we address it?
Yeah. That is true. Districts can be a punching bag, and everything that Laurie mentioned earlier with respect to private industry and their ability to subsidize and do a variety of different things, not comparing apples with apples, as Heather pointed out. Those are critical. You know, and the items that you mentioned with respect to competition, getting down to one provider in the area, that's a critical issue. And a lot of entities have dealt with that over the past number of decades. So how do you deal with it? I think this is an important thing that you're dealing with here. The items I hear in your discussions are critical and important to make sure there's understanding and transparency. And trying to do the best you can from a positive standpoint. Obviously, we have to deal with negatives, but sometimes when you communicate with people, I think it's to the degree that it could be couched in a positive way rather than a negative. That's certainly a positive thing. I'm getting a little bit micro there, perhaps a little bit, but Communications are important, and I think sometimes involving, if you can, figure out how in your particular situation, you can have some committees with some key citizens on that committee that can take it back in addition to board members to the community. Just a different world now, wasn't it? 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have the social media and a lot of the things that we have right now, where things can be communicated effectively, and false things can be communicated effectively as well. It's difficult to deal with. But in thinking about considering some resources of professional help you might have access to, I think that's an important discussion. And I think Heather may have as we kind of think about this over time, may have some ideas come to mind. We have access to some help from other states as well. 5, 6 years ago or more, we meaning Utah, with California, Oregon, Florida, and Colorado, created the National Special District Coalition. It's now the National Special District Association as of a couple of years ago. And by virtue of districts being members of the Utah Association of Special Districts, they are automatically a member of the NSDA, which gives us representation in Washington, D.C. Heather will be back there in a week or so on a fly-in, and as well as resources from other states where they have experienced similar problems. So we can cross-pollinate as Heather rubs shoulders with our NSDA folks in DC here in a couple of weeks. And we have meetings a couple of times every week on legislative issues, as well as our executive committee. We can extend a hand, say, folks, these are some of the things we're experiencing. Can you give us some feedback on experiences you have had on how you effectively communicated and overcome some of these problems, particularly in competition with private industry? And I think we can probably come up with some ideas and things with what other states have experienced might be helpful too. That's very good.
Just to add on to that, Washington County Water Conservancy District has an incredible model that they've been utilizing for over a decade, where once every, I don't know if it's every month or every quarter, but they invite all of the lawmakers, whether legislatively or cities, for the areas in which they serve, to come to the district and have a lunch and provide information and answer questions, and we'll give tours of the facilities whenever it's asked. So there's just this constant communication, not only between the board members of Washington County Water Conservancy District, but also their state representatives. Yeah, along with, because they'll have a board member from each individual city like you all have, or the county, but they'll invite all of the county council, and all of the mayors, and all of the city councils, for whoever can attend. And because they hold them so regularly, eventually most of them do show up. That's just a great way to keep everyone kind of in the loop of knowing what you're doing.
Thank you. I do want to share one thought. You brought up the fact that we as board members need to look after the best interest of the district. I think we've had a debate about that over the last year or so. But I think with what the legislature did this last session in regards to this specific district alone, it changed that dynamic a little more. So I think one of the things that we're talking about, and I do want to have this addressed today, is we're talking collectively right now about what the good things are and things we agree on. But I think we also have to acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is each community has different needs. And the fact that under current state law, well, is it May 1st yet? No, under May 6th. So not yet, but in a week, under what the law will be in a week or so, if my community doesn't feel like our needs are being met, then we have the ability to leave the district without approval of this board. And so, though today we're having this retreat, I think it's important that we all figure out what we like collectively. But I think it's true that the needs of Immigration Canyon and its residents are going to be clearly different than the needs or desires of the potentially in Harriman of what those elected officials will be. So at some point, and maybe it's a one-on-one with Evan, but at some point I would encourage each board member to just be blatantly honest and say, I don't feel like this is being met for my community. Because if we all come together and agree on 90%, if that 10% matters the most to your community, you may want to leave. And so we need to at least address what those things are, or so that we don't have people that splinter off, because let's also be honest, if some of those communities do, it then makes it very expensive. There's a different formula depending on where you are and how many residents and proximity to the district and fuel. But that's something that, again, I don't think we should shy away. We should be 100% forward and honest so that we can address these things, because if we don't do that today, then we're gonna be caught off guard 6 months from now. Does that make sense? My point is, when you brought that up, the dynamic has changed a little bit.
And there's an interesting tug of pull, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you do represent your city, and you do have needs, yet we do have the fiduciary responsibility of someone who serves on the board. So the fiduciary responsibility doesn't eliminate the fact that the city council is independent political subdivision, that they function and they have needs. But it doesn't eliminate the fact that we're fiduciary responsibility of someone reported to represent another political subdivision. So there's a tug and pull, not a separation of them.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting dynamic to work through. Good point. Good point.
I think, I've heard it said, sometimes we get on boards and we just become bobbleheads. And I know that's happened to me a couple of times. And you pay the price for that. And I'm not afraid to hear any of your conflicts that you have with your city. I think it's really healthy to find out what immigration needs. I'm not offended by anything. I'm not offended by the fact that Magna, you guys are just opening up as your own city. Your needs are going to be very different. And if there's any way that we can meet the special needs of individual cities, let's try and do that, because it keeps this organization healthy. But if
Not
we
only that, it strengthens our relationship.
it does, but I think it weakens if we are bobbleheads and then go back to our communities and say, yeah, I didn't really get what we needed out of there. But we didn't know. We need to know. We need to know so that we can strengthen the organization.
That's a great point. Hard to solve the problem if you aren't aware of what the problem is. Good. Excellent, thank you. And maybe just as a point of emphasis on what Heather said, and just again, reaffirm what she said, the importance of communicating with your legislators and other representatives and having them involved. That can't be overstated. Anything else you'd like me to discuss? I think we're good.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Grant. We appreciate you coming and taking the time. The next item on the agenda is we're actually gonna divide up into some breakout groups. So just so you're aware, Evan and Helen are gonna be running a breakout group on ongoing cost savings and rate retention initiatives. We all can't go to that group, but also line of service financial assessment by geographic area, which will be important. Renee is running breakout group 2, which I think is actually exactly kind of what we've been talking about today, with customer relations, satisfaction, and partnership building. And then breakout group 3, actually, Evan and Helen, where are you guys gonna be?
Group 1 can stay in this area. There's 2 other areas within.
Okay, so group 1 is gonna stay here, and then Renee, where are you gonna go?
Let's go over by the restrooms, everybody, it's a nice little cutting hall.
Okay, so there's an area over there for breakout group 3, and then Dave and Hazel, or that was group 2, sorry. And then Dave and Hazel, group 3, are gonna be talking about service models, and this is actually what we were just talking about, is geographic service area needs. So if you feel like the needs of your community aren't being met, you have some unique service needs, that's what David, Helen are gonna, or excuse me, Hazel are gonna be talking about, and you are going to be where?
Right.
Oh, this table right over there. All right, so let's break out, and get going.
Emily, how long will you begin? When should you begin?
Two was.
Well, I want to go.
You wanted to go to sleep.
It's a one and done, but it's. Yeah, they're good. We have a lot.
Big now, Emily. I'd like to hear everybody's thoughts.
So we're gonna come back as a group and kind of have each group summarize what they talked about. So, yeah, there's just so much we're trying to cover today, that's kind of the way that we felt like we could cover all of it. So I understand, no, I'm in the same boat too, there's a lot that I want to hear, so we just kind of have to prioritize just a little bit. Sorry.
But pick your top one you want to
Pick
go
the top
to,
one.
and maybe have a second in mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can just stay and just, or we can kind of group together. We do have some handouts that we provide. Most of it there.
This is Paul was asking about time, about 35 minutes, but let's go to 25 minutes and we're gonna come back so next time share. Okay, so in 25 minutes, we're gonna come back. Spencer Stokes. No.
So, I mean, no. So, it just. Just like this was then maybe even this one is just.
Okay, so this is the same.
Yeah. See, and we got to. Stay good. And 6 a.m. so put hours. It's fine. That's just stay good. His race. And so. Well, because. That's maybe. Sure.
It's because, this is why I was said that before. It's because I've done this long enough to know. You show up, you don't get to know the people, and then you kind of have your own opinions, you just take it home. Which is why I like, we're all the way to agreeable right now. I hope it's a joint one. But they're all.
Yes.
All being. Good afternoon. Lawn. Conversations. Like what's food. Anyway.
Thank you.
Very. Big.
Well, green is the color brand.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're just making interested in cost saving.
That we wouldn't say it's down right there, every crisis.
That's what I love. Okay, I like this guy. Sometimes everyone doesn't like this thing.
Yeah.
It's been, I think it's, we're offering things that are better than we have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want my fridge. So that I can.
So you can use this year, yeah.
Yeah, well.
Let's see if I can pull it up on my transactions.
Oh, was it recent? It is recent.
$119.
So we'll go to church. And then you give, I don't understand, that's $20 plus.
What's the $20 fee? What's up, $40, $45.
That's amazing.
And the great thing is they ask for, that's not what there's a tip line. Because what does not have. is a line.
See, they did that.
Like up to 20%. Like, hey, good job, you know what I mean? So, yeah. Usually when I'm mad, I don't do zero because I don't want to be a terrible person, but I'll give them like 10%. But then, you know, like standard is like 20 and it goes up and it's like, oh, I'm like, seriously, like, what, I paid you a fee to pick up a fridge, why, what are this tip? I can see if you're like there for 4 hours, like, yeah, there's a huge job.
Just to get back on like, so this is the hours and maybe get to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So restaurant, you go in and they have, oh, you
And I
have a
think
tip, like the minimum is.
Hey, no, get this, open fridge, I grabbed a water bottle. Well, hey, I went and bought it myself. Then there's a tip. A tip for what? A tip for what? But it was interesting, when one of them got contacted, he said, hey, let's walk around your house and see everything, you know. And he's, are you gonna keep, you know, they definitely were incentivized to do more stuff, which, I mean, I don't know, this is that. So I was like, what the hell? That has been sitting there for quite a while.
Well, you can also add this in some minutes.
Yeah.
Not for free, but.
Yeah, so we are supposed to be talking about some of the items here, which I think most folks are generally aware of. You know, the PGIs and, Helen and I are kind of falling behind a little bit on this initiative for the RSP. The initiative for the line of service financial assessment that we are still planning and actively, looking to solicit for that. So here's kind of what does this talk about? Yeah, there's actually still an audio we could maybe use.
And we can carry each other.
Okay, so just leave it open, which is fine, so. Well, I think most folks are aware that we have already identified what we saved from last year and some of those ongoing monies that are continuing as savings, whether they were issued under my predecessor, but also the things that have continued and initiated new opportunities and adapted those things as well. So this year we do have the PPIs that probably more now a little better, so very legible, but I know it's larger, but this year, last time we presented, I'll update this in more detail at a later time. But we have actually, we're moving forward with the co-star as opposed to the full small size.
Awesome.
And that amount is actually going, for this year, it's been implemented, it'll save us about 112,000. And then next year, it's closer to 200,000 to save us. So that's one of the highlights, which are the newer items.
Here's from my professor.
Correct.
Wasn't that so good?
I know, right?
It's so
And
satisfying.
people to just sign up for.
It's so great. It's so awesome.
So,
We do like sometimes competition on the postcard.
It's like.
And so,
for the paperless, yeah.
so, we're gonna have, that starts to give us that. These two things are huge cost savings, so, and then it makes sense to do some kind of financial reward, hey, like, we're paying now. Big, worthwhile, $500 to like, so many people, one new city or whatever else. Go to the app, find out, it's like this on the base, and like this on this, it makes it more.
So you can get your bill and on the app,
I have.
is that right?
Well,
You can't do that, but it makes it go the app. Have them try the app, if they did that, they can actually check to see what's recyclable. And then they just answer one question, there's ways you can do that, shows that they've been to the app. So that, it's really nice.
I think there's a payment app, we're transitioning to a new payment platform for us, like bill pay, the
Yeah.
point pay. We had an email that we weren't even expecting to go out, that hopefully has been corrected, but point pay, they have. So I like that idea, though, is that
So,
if somebody can sign up for paperless billing, and they're like able to check the box as to so we can track them. So we don't have.
I'm actually paid in full right now to send bills. Trying to pay. And, okay, so it's, I mean, it's still, even though we're saving 200K, it's still 400K, so it's substantial.
I mean, you should do, sign up for even, and win a chance to have a free month.
Yeah, but there's also social media where you can do it where things quick. I'd like to go, it's time that I've done this. I downloaded the app and I saw through this and I have some recommended we actually did it. And I said, but I've been, all I've been seeing that has considered the cost. And I went to that social media click, and then it says, and they can do it. I do it all the time. It's a great way, and then you got this group of people, because they're like, I can use it a lot for you. That makes great stuff. That's
Very interesting ways to go to paperless. I mean, I would, if I got a piece of mail that said, help us keep rates low, I could pay for $1,000 from the budget by going paperless. I do it. So,
I feel guilty.
well, part of it, you know, this, I'm actually not paperless, but I did that on purpose.
I would clear.
But I actually want, on the board, I want to see what you're sending and so.
Yeah, but you see it differently.
You like to experience what other people are experiencing. Like for me, I actually get all mine because people are constantly, they're saying, no, anyway.
I didn't get it.
Yeah.
I didn't get it. Yeah, I can see all the tissue when you go to the bottom.
Okay, so postcard, that's awesome. What else?
Well, there's quite a bit, and they're largely in those HGIs, which we'll review, probably, board meeting as well. But so we're trying to get feedback from this group or different board members as to what items should we focus on to maximize cost savings, to increase economies of scale, but also talking about service financial assessment, what specific scope we want to include. Right now, our plan is to look at identification of what it would cost and possibly what the reduced rate would be from a different tier of service. So going from recycle to every other. So there's other things that we're planning to include in this scope. So we just want to get feedback from this group and understand what might be more important things or additional things that we should look at to keep costs low, obtain our earnings, but also as to the scope of the line of service financial assistance.
There's the question. Side real quickly. Could you do that city by city? Is that like one city wanted things? And then also, I'm curious, would there be a huge cost if you wanted, like if the city wanted to go back? You should probably change. I don't know how that would work with workforce and all that.
The workforce.
Because I am curious, like, if communities, we really want to go back, then we could, because it's just too expensive that I'm here. But you don't really answer those.
No, yeah, great questions. Those are definitely things to consider. And I think would be on a city by city basis, and there would be the option to choose and go through their councils and feedback from their residents. As to what they want to do.
okay, one of the big knuckle about this is that you get finance and they're choosing what they want to do.
And, you know, they may not win the argument, everybody else will be making power cities, but at least they feel like, I do have a say. I'm just like.
I'm going to throw something out there. We have not competed with folks. I think it's time. It's competing with us. So we've got islands now, South Down. I maybe one.
No, there's a discussion on this, actually, the next item on our agenda. No, it's definitely a discussion that we want to have participation.
We have, and for me, a proper place for that, and I'm gonna give you a proper place. The legislature was created that. For us to service that island, now it's created. Further out, urban is no longer gonna be in the area. Isn't it? I'm perfect solid kind that's now. Like you call it. We don't have the economies to go. So let's go pick up businesses all the way along the way, so they're no longer in islands. Let's take it out here.
What island are you talking about?
The unincorporated Salt Lake County, they got 500 states.
I have to say on some.
Yeah.
Does Fisher's bill not force them to annex? Because
They're not an island. They're not an island.
Or district boundaries, but not.
Yes, they're not an island, so they're not forced to incorporate. So we have a lot of peninsulas, that would be a peninsula, because the entire surrounding area of unincorporated Salt Lake County, all the canyons are still unincorporated. We still have the largest portion of the Salt Lake County area, land is unincorporated. It just so happens that the bottom of the bowl is now all cities. So people don't understand that the greatest part of the Lake County is still unincorporated land. Most land is still unincorporated. It just doesn't. Well, 1,200 people living in that. Well, I mean, you got the whole west side of the area, but the whole east side isn't. So you gotta think that through, right? We still have a lot of unincorporated roads, land, sea, we have to service. Because we're a county. We just don't have people living in those areas. And that's the part that people don't grasp. The greatest part of land in Salt Lake County is still unincorporated. Because it's the top of the mountain, to the top of the mountain. Great Salt Lake. And when you start looking at that land, there's a lot still there. We just haven't, it's checked it out. It's canyons. So,
And I filled it out.
so we may be talking about bowl where it's livable, right? And that's city to city and wall to wall. But we still have responsibility outside of that.
So you're saying, why not get commercial in those areas?
So when we're going out to these mountains for the service area, let's make it profitable going out there. Let's go get those businesses on the way. And let's find a way to hit the ones that will be profitable for us. There's some HOAs along the way that are private. Let's go get those. Let's more and more of them. That's
how about that? Do we have any rules or regs or bylaws or anything
we can check
about
We do.
basically going after, I mean, I'm sure there's some rules, like we would go to Lehigh and start, I mean, there's probably some parameters that we live in, right? But what are the rules today? Could you go pick up a bunch of stuff that's not even in our district?
Yes, theoretically, yes, so.
In business,
Or we can go that.
They could annex in through the district to be run.
but could a business
Absolutely, they can
that's
contract.
not in, you can.
So the resolutions are in the next upcoming agenda item. Just looking at how increasing our serviceability beyond what we're restricted currently stuff to our board plans. But there's kind of or statements, or if a business requests service, then services may be provided. It doesn't even include us from operating outside of our defined service area.
We can actually contract if we wanted to, if it's cost effective and it makes sense. Where we have to drive out of now, just go pick up business along those routes to make it cost effective to go out there. Those are some of the things we need to start looking at to make it cost effective.
So let me ask you this. We, obviously, the residents of these communities may like that idea because it's more revenue to the district, we're gonna help keep costs low. But this is more of a philosophical question. Are all these residents also subsidizing an organization that's now really competing with the private sector?
I'm not saying be everywhere, I'm just saying let's make it cost effective to go to where we're supposed to now.
There's.
There.
You know, I think, was it stated that, there is no statement that private haulers would not go after cities, public. It was just an understood.
Yeah.
Right? And that's when they started breaking out saying, well, there's nothing right. It can't. And I think now that they've decided they were gonna go after cities, which again, if they were competitive and they could do all these things, and we know that their prices would never go up, yada, 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 I'm okay with that. But that's not the truth. So if they're gonna go after cities, I think Woodward, in order to stay competitive, pick up some of those routes along the way.
I would just suggest we be careful,
Be really.
because I already know, because my mind is built to think politically savvy, it's a very important place. If I am representing those haulers, I'm going back saying, what the hell wrong with Woodward? You guys made some changes. Again, they're they're going out there and just government's completely competing, completely outside of their districts with the private sector. You guys need to put them back in their
And
ball.
we put a parameter on it, this is where I put the parameter on it. You just forced us out, legislature and everybody else. We now have to find ways to make this cost effective, to fill with an island that we could have never dealt with, because you took us out of our normal parameters. We would never have allowed them out and given us an island, which is now not cost effective for us to serve. We're gonna put a parameter that says, in order for us to make this cost effective, we're gonna pick up some business along the route to make it cost effective. We'll put some guardrails along. So
You
we're
get
looking
the sentiment though. I mean,
yeah.
But I've had an initial reaction of legally, yes, if they contract, if you could, but that appearance of competing with the private sector is problematic, and I understand the hypocrisy because the private sector is absolutely going after the district. So I see that, but I also,
But we're
not that all the time, that is an argument that lawmakers get behind.
But I would say this, I would say, if it were me, I would absolutely go after everything you possibly can in the district, in those areas. I'm not prepared to say, and there's plenty to go after, just get seller.
We go after.
Oh, yeah, you could totally expand those cities for sure. But then you could also, in compromise, go after every single business apartment complex or anything. And I think that is the safest path to start, kind of to see how it goes. It's really defensible. Like, we're staying completely within our boundaries. I think you start there and see how it typically will get then.
Not go absolutely.
Well, it's not even necessarily.
No, I said,
It's not necessarily doing, it's just being able to provide the service that they contact us.
Yeah.
It's open. Right?
no, let's say.
And the other thing that we're seeing is that when things are redeveloped, so just look around Mill Creek as well, there's multifamily developments well above and beyond fourplex.
Yeah.
That we by our county resolutions cannot service unless we're explicitly requested to.
Yeah.
Consider in our purview or base services that we provide.
If we change the part of the do we have this access to do it? I mean, it's gonna take different forms.
Yeah, right.
And does that just increase our price? And it's not effective.
Right, so that's the big part of this line of service financial assessment. Right, so another part of this upcoming board objective item is a map of a service area that shows all the areas we're collecting with our truckload trucks. Which you'll see, we go over, all over the entirety, we're down on the tree, we're up in, we're up in town, so multiple days a week with these trucks. So our economies of scale, efficiencies are extremely better. These are largely because of contract with Salt Lake County. But we picked up other services along the way, so it's nothing we're gonna be stopping anytime soon. But we do have 3 of those trucks right now. Yeah, I know, you can see kind of scale around it.
For sure.
Right.
I can touch that. Yeah, that's why I'm suggesting we start doing some of those routes, you know.
But smaller businesses can be the side loads. A lot of these HOAs that we've actually had to give up services are still using cans. Which to me is kind of crazy because there's like all these dense households that you're going versus cans that are everywhere throughout the community. Instead of having many zoning requirements to build an enclosure and have a front. But we've actually given up like over 1,000 accounts. Because of these HOA and private type provisions and past policy and it's changed over time. Now, that's part of that other discussion as well, so.
So, and if they asked to change, or it was just solely because of our limiting, we can't continue. But this.
I'm sure I don't have the full.
So, liability issue. Because I get over there, it's a liability issue. We don't have this final person, they go in and blah, blah, blah. It's a liability.
The idea was, HOAs can have smaller roads. On the street and stuff like that. The liability is an issue, where our trucks are bigger, so, you know, there's. Around sometimes, maybe spaces. So, what are your options, how do you have service that, right? That you can more, because they're all close together, right? And so, how does that work? Well, oftentimes it's cities on it. And so that's what they were about. Private company. They said it's, you know. So it was like the issue that they just were stopping.
There's something I hope. Someone just said we're done. Okay. There you go. Yeah, part of the private road agreements for Renee has been, that's 15 hour, which first started, better, so. We had some. So, yeah, thanks all.
Oh,
Nothing. So it's something that I find it was. They're saying.
Right.
And all of a sudden, we start, it's thought that was taught, but now, with it, was better.
So I'm
Wait, great.
yeah, yes.
Okay, go ahead. Thank you, sir. Right? What do you think the lead on? Yeah. Brian, you.
Well, this is a board engagement.
I'm not big man. I have everything.
Whoa. One more.
We'll come to summarize and.
Okay, so Matt, just group two, you guys have somebody who's gonna summarize for?
Yes, Emily.
Okay, great.
I mean, we're back in February. So, yeah, that was nice. I mean,
I did ask about the, is it getting colder? I don't know. It's getting colder to me, so I can finally be. It feels like there's sweater on. I know, I would be like.
All right, you guys, yeah.
Like that.
Let's get started. Yeah. Yeah, be like. Every time. All right, so, I say at least for, group two we were in, that was a fantastic discussion. As I confident every group had great discussion. So we're just gonna kind of summarize. Let's start with group one. Matt, is the spokesperson for group one.
I lost and you're having to summarize. So, quick summary, I was most interested in this, not surprising to you all, about just cost saving measures that we're gonna be implementing. Very excited about moving over to a postcard that each resident is going to get. In this packet here that we got, which I'm sure it sounds like at our next meeting, we'll have a full overview on all of these, but what was really neat, something that I think, again, telling our story that we can go back to our communities. So it costs $600,000 annually to send bills, an actual mail piece to each home, but moving to the card in 2026, we will save $112,000. In 2027, we will save $200,000 to the district simply by switching to a different method of what we're mailing. We then talked about some of the bylaws and other things that we're going to need to address as a board on allowing us to go after some different, I guess, multifamily or businesses or other options to try to get more people in the district. Again, economies of scale, trying to get some other people to participate to keep costs down, which I think is a goal of everyone in this room. And that was kind of the theme and approach to our group. Anything else that I missed? Co-attendees?
Great. Maybe doing some contests to get people to sign up for,
Paperless.
paperless.
Oh, I like that.
Because $400,000, if we could figure out how to try to transition that as a substantial amount of money annually, to try to get more people to go paperless would save us a ton of money. So.
All right, breakout group 2.
Yeah, happy to share. We talked about communication and kind of talked about, you know, this idea of these two groups, right? One, making sure that we're communicating with our council, but also with residents in the district, and a lot of times those connect as well. So we revisited this idea of how do we educate and kind of get our councils as part of the buy-in here, and maybe some ride-alongs or something could be something fun to do that don't take too many resources away. We talked specifically about how to reach residents. The concern was brought up about the new pay system and how residents do have to come back and reset up their automatic banking. And so making sure that that communication, one, there will be a grace period that they've already worked through, and they know that there'll be some growing pains with that, but making sure that the communication is that this was federally, we had to make sure we couldn't just automatically transfer it over, and we're transferring because of, we're saving you money, but this will ultimately be benefit our business. So we appreciated that. I think the major ask that one of us from Brunei that we talked about was that everyone here make sure that they are connected with your current PIO or whoever is sharing that information, that there's turnover in staff, and so sometimes the communication gets stuck that way. So I think unless you know that that is currently happening, make sure that you connect them specifically. Even if you think maybe it's happening, maybe an introduction email this morning would be good. So we talked a lot about the video ideas, some social media pieces. It sounds like is it James that you said, who does sustainability, but is kind of expanding this idea of how do we communicate more what our services are. And so they're brainstorming that. And then we looked briefly at the 2025 satisfaction survey. And that, I think that you said that will be in the packet moving forward. So those of us that are newer to the board, that might be something to look through. But overall, it sounds like it was very positive, and that's what has been used really to make some of these changes moving forward. But it was kind of nice to see that communication. So, did I miss anything?
No, I think that you got it. I think it was very helpful. I would just add, Renee had a lot of good ideas about engaging our entire councils so that we're not the only ambassadors. That we can get all of our councils on board, which I was really excited about. All right, breakout group 3 with
So ours was focusing on evaluating current service models across geographic service areas, including the needs, expectations, and operational realities that shape service delivery. So we did talk about the different services that some of our communities are receiving versus others. We talked about the fact that it doesn't necessarily work as a one-size-fits-all type scenario. We had a lot of the smaller communities there at our focus group, so we brought up a lot of issues with, you're paying this fee every month, and this is what everybody's receiving. However, there's certain communities that are not receiving glass pickup. There are certain communities that are not receiving green waste pickup, and there are certain communities that the dumpster program is not necessarily serving as well as it could be. So we spent a lot of time kind of addressing some of those issues, because I think a lot of the smaller communities don't necessarily get as much of that time to really discuss how important those issues are to them. Which brought in some good information, just brainstorming. We talked about whether or not recycling every other week is something that would benefit the communities as a whole, and how that would be perceived by the community once if that were to be enforced. We talked about whether or not that could offset different services being better provided to some of the areas that are maybe further away or require different machinery to be able to pick up, like Brighton, for example, front loading only, or Copperton being way out on the west bench, or very limited access on the street in Richmond County. So just trying to find a way to be able to get the opinion from the board member or the community that serves here, and then being able to discuss that with their respective councils, and then being able to get the information from the residents on what their priorities are, whether it's recycling, whether it's green waste, whether it's glass collection, and being able to articulate how those savings can benefit them, rather than them just seeing, well, this is what I'm paying a month, so why are we cutting services? Making sure that they understand it's not a cut in service, it's just balancing that so that we can provide the best service all the way around. Does that summarize for my group? Okay.
You didn't get it.
Thank you.
All right, we're now going to move over to Evan, and he's actually gonna talk about, something that Matt just brought up, as far as looking our evolving landscapes, as far as the different kinds of services that we're providing, and opportunities we have to expand that. So, Evan?
Yeah, thanks so much. Really, if you can pull up that summary. And then, so there are some additional attachments. This is item 3.7. It's page 45 of the board packets. So there's a one-page, very brief background and summary into some options or alternatives for the board's consideration, but there also are some maps and other information just to further support the discussion. So when this organization was created, we were created with certain limitations throughout our defined service area or boundaries, which would constitute this organization's jurisdiction. So within that jurisdiction, we have been given, in essence, primacy for servicing residential trash and recycling for single-family households with limitations up to a fourplex. Anything beyond a fourplex is in essence considered open markets. But this district historically has, again, maybe an 8 months organization, but it's sort of declined or not sought to provide those services. And we know that just seen around Mill Creek, there's a very much evolving and changing landscape in Salt Lake County. And a lot of the new developments are multifamily apartments that are having, well beyond a fourplex in some cases, but having these more centralized, high density, higher volume generating residential units. So there's also in the packet some information on resolutions, what defines a property units. But I'm just going to read a couple of things here from the summary. So, due to these limitations, the district's economies of scale have been hindered. and service cost for residential customers meeting the definition of a property unit are not able to be offset by servicing high-density, larger volume generating properties. So consequently, we've had to actually defer services. Renee's worked a lot on our private road agreements, but recalls that we've actually had to actually give away services up to 1,000 various plus units throughout a period of time due to our resolutions, our policies, and also some of the provisions that are in the current policy manual as well. So it's basically, how do we seek to evolve, to grow, to maximize what we just had discussed already today as a common theme is our economies of scale. And so by servicing, these other types of properties, we can offset our costs as individual households by providing all the services that we provide beyond just weekly trash and recycling as well. So kind of the questions here, should we research and identify what this may or may not look like from this district taking on multifamily residential dwellings, apartments, for example? Do we look at hotels, other short-term lodging accommodations? Or do we want to open up to a larger array of services, businesses, offices, retailers, restaurants, et cetera? So throughout our service area, outside of the residential services we provide, those services are open markets. So it's basically, in essence, open competition. So if we can go in and provide some of those services, and it's not that we would be hiring a sales team and going out and lobbying at the League of Cities and Towns, and et cetera, so on and so forth, but opening up those services, giving that as an option, looking to grow those. But I guess even, do we adapt our resolutions? Do we open up our jurisdiction, service area boundaries to all residential properties, for example? What does that model look like in essence? And so the next page on the agenda, Renee, has a few things up. If you go to that map of Salt Lake County, the very first, it's page 46. So if you can just zoom in a little bit, towards the bottom to start, if you don't mind on the screen. One more level if you can. These aren't as simple as they used to be. So this map is showing where we are. Can I interject a question? Yes, sir.
Just for historical purposes, is there a reason why we haven't done this from the beginning? Why that was part of it?
I think
It's not the appropriate time to ask.
No, it's
I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, the short answer is, Salt Lake County has just largely been like a city that was primarily like single family residents, and so that was like the primary mission, and that mix of additions has just been gradually changing over the years. So I think, is that the fair enough to say the short answer of that?
That's my understanding. So this district was created before all these areas within our service areas were in essence
Incorporated.
Right? So we're using that economies of scale model to provide services throughout the county where they didn't have municipalities or other incorporated areas that were seized. So that model's remained the same, but I think at the same time, Utah as a state, and I think Salt Lake County and their larger metro areas are sensitive to private sector, those services open to private sector.
So it sounds like not a principal reason at the beginning. So that's fine.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, that's great.
Can I chime in on that too? I would just say that as a district, even though we are 100% independent at this point in time, we are limited to what our creation documents gave to us. It's more or less, the district is created by either a city or county. And that city or county held the power and obligation to provide those services before, and it more or less divested itself of those powers and gave it to us. And anything that it didn't give to us, it retained for itself. So we can't expand our services beyond what was stated in the documents. But what I will say is that the documents limit us in terms of like our primary responsibility, but it doesn't stop there. It does say, and you can do all these other things if, I think it says if like those entities come to you and request service, So it's not like we're completely barred, it's just that would not be part of our primary obligation model, but we can do all of those under more like a contract basis with those entities.
It's not like we're going against a foundation.
We're not going against foundational principles. Yeah, that said, well, that's all I'm saying.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And I'll say our services are broad in those definitions, which again, they're highlighted in the resolutions. But I want to get to our front load services, which are the big metal container collections. We recently plotted all these locations on a map of Salt Lake County. And so if there's a legend on the bottom of this page here that I would encourage you to look at, if the shape is a square, then it's a service we're providing under an interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County, but we've been providing those services for a long period of time, probably 10 plus 20 years. The different colors indicate the level of service on top of that as well. But what you'll quickly see is that we are all over this county. We're in downtown Salt Lake City. We're in Draper on various occasions throughout the year. Yes.
It's not on the map.
That is correct. So Brighton, Big Cottonwood Canyon is kind of off the map, but we also are providing those services.
Don't worry, we don't care.
You're like the last scared Hawaii.
Yeah, it's okay. I was thrilled to see our tiny one on there. Actually, not the, on, see.
And so we have these trucks running throughout Salt Lake County, which we have, like, the nature of those contracts with Salt Lake County for a period of over a decade. But obviously you'll see there's significant distance in between this location. So anything that we could expand to, I think primarily within our service area, but I had no idea until recently we were down in Draper, providing services at various parks, cemeteries, and downtown Salt Lake on North Temple. Some of these are multiple collection days per week, and if it's a green square or a green circle, a circle is like a private, through a different type of contract that's within our services. But a square is Salt Lake County, but then a green is trash and recycled collection. So that's not one truck, that's two trucks going to those areas. So there's just a lot of opportunities to enhance our economies of scale, our efficiencies here, but also to maximize those higher volume generating facilities to offset our costs to other businesses. So I've worked in various other special districts. I've been into a limited degree the private sector, not in collections, but in the past two other solid waste sections that I oversaw and managed. We had a blend of commercial collection services. And commercial was, in a lot of cases, was actually our higher revenue generating service as compared to single family households. Right now, we are completely, in most cases, hindered from providing services throughout our service areas. So the kind of question is, and I don't think we have time to go through all of this, but there are some areas in the founding resolutions that services may be provided to planning unit developments, condominiums, commercial and industrial properties upon request. And there's also a section about providing to facilities owned and operated by municipalities or within and outside the district at the request of the municipal governing body, and it's approved by the board, which is kind of a misnomer in some cases. Because why can we provide to businesses without approval from the board and not the municipalities without formal approval from the board? So I would encourage all of our members just to review at least the highlighted sections in these. So the one resolution is from 2016, which is when the Administrative Control Board was created. Was provided a little bit more clarity, but then the 2022, which is much more abbreviated, it's silent in a lot of these provisions, was when Woodford became a local district or now a special district.
So, just want to be clear, so what the ask for today is not making a decision about each of these multifamily hotels, all of those different categories of businesses, is making a decision if we want to research the cost effectiveness of those of those avenues and really see what it would look like to expand our park. So we're not making the decision to do that today, we're just making the decision to research it today.
Correct, yes. And so what areas should we focus on or research, and what's the best strategic path forward in looking at this particular topic?
I think we need to research all of them and really, and so that we have all of the data to make the best decision possible, for the district.
And looking at what, last meeting, looking at all those dots, it is that is part of expanding the business itself. What are the routes that pass by those areas? And that's where we can target additional businesses. We would have to change the routes. Pick up some cans in those generalized areas. So where the route finding, wayfinding is on this, can we pick up XXX on the way so that we don't incur any additional cost? We're just increasing our revenue base.
Well, and we've also seen, so it's better, like you're saying, for areas where we're in the area anyway, and it just makes sense for efficiencies to move forward. So, do we have a consensus with the board that we would like to pursue, researching and, anybody opposed to that?
I'm gonna be the devil's advocate, even though I was the advocate. Matt brought up something, if we start going after, or we're perceived as going after some of these commercial spots, then does that mean our residents feel like that they are subsidizing the pickup of commercial entities? And then number two, I've been thinking about just a little community, HOA community in Taylorsville that has wide streets. When they planned it, we said, no, expand your street. Woodford can easily go in and pick up their trash, it would be awesome. However, they're only paying $19 a month. So if we go in and say, you're now with Woodford, then we get the call saying, how dare you do that? I'm now paying 26, where I'm only paying 19, but they're part of Taylorsville, where they were getting the advantages from some of the other stuff. So I'm just being the devil's advocate there.
So I actually don't disagree with you. To me, that's why I think we need to do the research. I'm not saying that we're all on board with all of this. I think we just need the data so that we can look at those kind of situations that are, I'm sure we all have those in our community. So to me, it's just like we need more data
I think so.
to really make this decision, because I'm where I am.
Can I ask a question? Does the research and compiles the data?
Great question. So that's something we didn't mention as part of the earlier breakup session. So this year we have budgeted, or we're actually developing an RFP. We fall a little behind based on other priorities and needs, but a line of service financial assessment that we're looking at to basically understand the true cost of providing the varying services by geographic services. So the cost of trash collection, recycle collection, green waste collection, for example. So we're actually going to be including other scenarios. We want this consultant, ultimately a third-party financial consultant, to look at this information for us. We'll be developing and looking at issues as well. So looking at what's the cost savings or the rate adjustments for going every week recycling versus weekly recycling. What we do to expand our green waste collection services, for example. So it'll be predominantly a third-party financial assessment from a consultant. If I may, just a few other things. So we have a couple of maps in the board packet as well. So if you can go just to the Holiday Hills one today. So HOAs are now also developing multifamily mixed-use developments. So the HOA typically wants a single service provider because you're billing directly to the HOA, and in some cases, individual residents. So this is a new development in Holiday Hills where we've actually been asked to provide service on the eastern portion of what you would consider this map. So the green section there, which are fourplexes, triplexes, some are sixplexes. So, but if you look towards the north portion, there are combined multifamily apartments being developed there as well, and of course, other mixed-use developments here too. So if we can't provide all the services, sometimes we actually have to say, oh, well, we can no longer, we actually give that service away. So if we can't provide all the services that they need, then we lose that business, we lose that revenue, we lose that efficiency and economies of scale. So this is another reason why I think we can rarely demonstrate why we need to adjust and have more flexibility what I think are quote unquote serviceability with this organization. And another thing you'll see in the resolutions is that we're able to provide collection, transportation, and I think and processing and some other thing as well. So in essence, this district has the scope and the ability to develop or operate its own transfer station, develop and operate its own materials recovery facility for recycling, develop and operate our own composting operation, for example. So there are a lot of opportunities that we've not necessarily looked at nor pursued in the past. So we're kind of looking at what strategic initiatives should we look at, what should we prioritize in looking at those opportunities. Thank you.
I say go, go, go.
Yep, yeah, let's look at all of it. All right, I think, does that give you direction that you need to?
A little bit more focused. Well, we can still look at it. So it'll be part of the financial assessment as well. We'll
Okay.
kind of have some broad categories.
All right.
Obviously, there's a large degree of possibilities in increasing our efficiencies on our front load collection services just based on that map. And so we're actually already looking at these things. Just want to make sure we didn't have, the board wants us to prioritize one other item over the other. But we'll come back with more information as we do that.
Are front loader trucks cheaper?
From a new capital cost perspective,
Versus some of the other types of vehicles?
David may have a good answer to that. I would say the side loads are more expensive because of the arms and the technologies.
Yeah.
of the arms. But you're probably 50,000 more at most. So the side loads, we're getting like, what, 420-ish thousand. The commercial front loads are probably 380, 390,
What compares long term?
probably fewer. Because the arms are used times a day on a side load, but the front load is, maybe like 100
Less.
more. So long as they're maintained and greased and things like that. And they can pack more, they can haul more.
Yeah. Right.
As appropriate, since it sounds like there's not the going out, it's in the budget. If appropriate, I don't know, yes, not only looking at the financial implications of it, but how those financial implications are communicated out. Might be something to consider since you have a consultancy that's there, not only what the economics are, but the actual, the public discourse. Be something that have to work into.
All right, I think, we're gonna forego an official break. However, like if you're singing in a choir, everyone needs to take a breath at a different time. People need to excuse themselves. We can just kind of do it all at different times. We can keep moving forward because we're now moving to what I know everybody really wants to get into. We have set aside a large block of time to talk about is, bulky waste, program and design, and Evan's plans for the future. So Evan and David and Renee are gonna dive into that. So go for it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think we're gonna go ahead and start with Renee. So Renee has, seen something that looks similar to this in the past.
Actually, Evan, I'm so sorry. I have to leave at 11:30 for another meeting. That's kind of my day is. So just so you know, after this piece, Keith is gonna be taking over running the meeting, just so we're aware. Okay, sorry, go.
So as Renee has put together in the past, the cost of service comparison amongst across various cities in Davis, Salt Lake, and Utah County. And so the second exercise she's done, which is in the packet as well, is put together a comparison of how those similar cities manage, fund, limit, and or restrict their bulky waste programs. What is the means and methods of providing those services? How often they're provided, what's accepted and what's not accepted, for example. And so we wanted to start with a brief overview of this item. I think we're going to try to get into the Excel file, but this is also in the board packet. But what we found is that Woodford is currently, as far as we know, for providing residential bulky waste services, we are the only organization providing via a container service. So pretty much the entirety, the remainder of all the other areas, unless the fee for a container or box, those bulky waste programs are predominantly, almost entirely, a curbside-based program or a central container program or a residence drop. So I want to have Renee just give an overview of this comparison, and the idea is to learn and glean from this comparison, and hopefully any adjustments to our program moving forward, we can take the best, examples, criteria, et cetera, and for our program.
Right.
That's up to Renee.
Yeah, so just to keep in mind, when you look at this, again, just a dump of data, right? Is that this is when I compared it, it was looking at what was included within their basement. So this isn't other paid programs. This is, okay, what bulky waste, is there a bulky waste program included or not? And so just high level observations of when I went through and looked at all these cities, is that it's obvious Woodford absorbs most of the risk and cost that, that maybe other bulky waste programs do not. So for example, historically, if someone puts a mattress or tires, or if they just put a bunch of, construction debris in their container, we're paying for that, right? So that's where we're really starting to pay more attention to where the residents are putting in the containers, making sure that they know ahead of time. Hey, don't put any tires in there, don't put any mattresses, we'll put a mattress in there this time, but we're gonna start operating that paying for service, coming up. And so that was a huge observation right there. In other cities that did a bulky waste type of program, they actually would essentially charge residents or fine them if they were breaking those rules, or they just didn't pick it up. Like, it's just gonna stay there. So they didn't have to absorb that cost. And as Evan said, no other program that was included with bulky waste involved a container. And so a container-based program is obviously giving a higher cost and a little more demand risk, right, to the customer's property, et cetera. And then, as you probably know this, the regulation process is very complex. And so we think, we weeded through a lot of that complexity and made it a lot more simpler. But we're hoping to go there where it's going to be a lot easier, where residents can call and just schedule it, go on and schedule it a little more frequently to where you're not going to have the process. And then, I like to say our container-based program has been essentially a larger fraction effort. And so the surprises of what was in there, like I already talked about, is definitely interesting. So that was, again, I think the overall observations there. It's a lot of data, and like call out any specific cities or anything. So if you can take some time and really look at that. Some questions.
I guess I do have a question, but maybe we don't go to this now. How do they do curbside? How does it execute it? Is that appropriate to have that now? Okay.
It really depends on how the program's set up. We learned from Salt Lake City, they have different, heavy equipment that goes out on the streets. They actually use, in some cases, a dump truck, which is a much taller, type mechanism to move the material into. But oftentimes it is, a rear load truck, where you load into the back portion of that truck, either manually or with a piece of, hydraulically operated equipment.
And there's size restrictions, like even for green waste, it can only be like 4 or 5 foot width, and they have to cut it out and they even go pick it up. In Salt Lake City, another item that they do is if the customer does have a mattress, they're supposed to put a mattress to the side, and a separate truck will come out and grab it. So it's very, very different, and there's lots of, but consistently, we saw that, construction material wasn't allowed. Those tire items weren't allowed. The new guidelines that we have for our scrap program, is pretty consistent with what now, all the other cities are adopting.
It's an interesting thing because if somebody puts materials that you don't want to take, you still need the bin back. Right? With our current structure, you need that physical bin because someone else has a reservation. Versus if someone's putting materials on a curb, it's like, hey, we're not picking this up because you have XXX. I mean, it does give you that flexibility. So someone's not holding onto a bin for a year or something.
So just to kind of summarize some of the things that Renee has already mentioned is that different cities and service areas, they have, they'll accept different volumes of items, different types of items. And then vice versa, they won't accept certain types of items or items over a certain volume of material. Where the material is placed, curbside, at the curb, Sandy City is like 3 feet from the curb for stormwater concerns. It's a lot of things to look at as it relates to this. And our scrap program, in essence, is still, in most cases, being used as a larger trash container. So people still have bag trash in there. They're still putting mattresses in. There's still a variety of other items as well that are going in there. What we have preliminarily talked about is that having a more structured program that would look at maybe a curbside model, but it wouldn't fit every city, every service area, the canyons. It wouldn't be a one size fits all. So what is really the best path forward, the next steps as part of that. But Renee, if you go to the presentation as the next part on this particular discussion item, I'm going to kind of go over some of those items as well, and also highlight what we're doing this year. So begins on page 76 of the board packet. I can get there. I think everyone is aware that this year we really, the approach was to ramp up our capacity to better meet service demand. And we certainly are doing that, and that's exactly what we've been doing as we plan for the scrap season. This is also predicated that late last year, the board provided direction to suspend the trailer rental fee-based program along with the scrap and fee-based program, which was outside of the scrap season. So this year we budgeted for 12 seasonal drivers plus 2 permanent drivers with a goal of servicing no less than 72 containers per day. Historically, we've averaged about 60 containers per day in past scrap seasons. And to my understanding, the goal of the organization has been historically is to provide 10% of all households serviced by the district throughout each various city and service area, but 10% per year. And in the past years, we've been, I think last year in 25, it was about 9% of total households serviced. And so this year, we've certainly ramped that up significantly. And so if you go to the next slide, please, Renee. This is just a example as a model as to what we're doing. So this year, we have, as we've done in the past, different zones depending on the number of parcels, number of residents, households, et cetera, per service area. And so this is just an example for the Holiday Murray combined scrap service area zone. So we have 3 zones. Each of those zones gets a postcard that's mailed on a specific date. And those zones are tied to specific collection days that are grouped by proximity to maximize efficiency and to maximize the serviceability and hauling. So from there, we have the reservations, of course, with the early bird and the general access, which we've discussed, and then the actual service dates for them. So it's one time per year. If you miss it one time a year, you're out of luck and you have to wait till next year. Or you can actually sign up for the special collection that we've implemented. So as part of this slide and for all of our service areas, so in past years, we were having about 65 containers a day reservations that you could accept. And there was some for a wait list. This year we have, for each zone, for each day, we are allowing up to 75 container reservations per day for the online requests. And this is specific to the valley communities, not necessarily the canyons. I'll talk about that here a little bit later as well. We've optimized the early bird program to open at 8 a.m. as opposed to midnight. We're leaving those open. We're working out some kinks and continuing to maximize and optimize the online reservation process. And so that, when I skipped ahead a little bit, that's okay. Those dates are kind of tied to that, so to optimize the ease of use and the way in which we're managing this program throughout the year, which again, one time per week. So this slide is showing our performance year to date. So we've actually exceeded the 72 containers per day. So we've started with Cottonwood Heights this year. And the left-hand table there is showing how many containers we've serviced per day since the program started up through April 22nd. So we're averaging actually over 76 containers per day. We've really strategized on our recruitment and retention for our seasonal drivers, which is actually going quite well. We'd like to do that. And we're optimistic that we can continue to maximize those drivers with some of those strategies that we've implemented this year. And then the other thing that we've done, so one, first and foremost, we have expanded our services, and compared to past years, at least this year thus far, we are servicing 25% more than we have in the past consecutive years, based on these current numbers of those daily deliveries of service of containers. The other thing we're doing is we started some interim bulk loading. So before we talk about this, these containers have to be individually hauled to a transfer station and back. So there's significant travel time, fuel time, driver time, et cetera, on these. So we've started to actually, for some of our communities this year, have brought these containers to centrally based locations where we're actually tipping those containers onto an impermeable surface. And we've rented a small hydraulically operated skid steer that is loading out, taking those clear from the ground, loading those into a rear load truck. And so what we've seen on that, and what this chart shows in the upper right hand corner, is that we're approaching now about 2/3 of the containers we're all loading into these rear load trucks. And in some cases, we've actually been able to fit 12 and even up to 14 individual containers into one truckload that's then subsequently going to a transfer facility. So thereby maximizing our efficiencies and hauling that. But of course, we have to have an operator for the skid steer and an operator for the rear of the truck. What we've seen, if you look at the bottom right hand portion of this, I should have ran the numbers, and David's working on some really great ongoing metrics we can track, but our cost per ton, but also our tons per load. Tons per load has increased substantially, and our cost per ton is actually going down, and it will actually help us in some cases when we're hauling to the Trans-Jordan landfill, if we're able to service this way, because Trans-Jordan has a minimum 1 ton charge. So if we haul less than a ton, then we get dinged for that full amount, so our cost per ton benefits. So point of this slide is that we are actually doing quite well this year thus far. Program started April 6th. And we continue to service beyond our minimum goal of 72 containers per day. I'll pause. Any questions? One thing as part of these central bulk loading is that there's not a lot of places to do it. In most cases, they're publicly accessible, and some of those are in various parks. So we did work a little bit in Warren Park in Cottonwood Heights, and we're actually at one of the salt piles currently, and we've actually worked with White City and MSD and Salt Lake County Parks and Rec. So when we start servicing White City next week, we'll be using Big Bear Park to central bulk load these materials as well. So we may be looking to pursue this. Once we actually move from there, we'll be down, and everything goes in a clockwise fashion. So from Sandy White City, we end up down in Harriman and Copperton, and up to Magna, then Kearns, then Taylorsville, then Oak Creek, et cetera. So we rotate through, but we may be seeking some other central bulk loading areas as part of these as well. But the other thing that we're planning to do, and I have an example for pretty much every one of these other cities, and again, we're maximizing our throughput, our serviceability, our tonnages for Pownell Heights. We should see the same for Point City and Sandy. Harriman and Copperton are so close to the landfill that we feel like we can still meet these services without having to supplement them with other types of services. So Copperton should be getting 72 plus containers per day as well, a minimum. But we also are seeing some of our service areas that we've never really been able to meet or the needs for bulk waste removal. So we're looking at some limited one-time, at least for this year, supplemental public drop-off events for bulky waste. And so we're planning these somewhat last minute. A lot of this is just really we're doing everything we can to maximize our serviceability this year, to better meet service demands. With some of the changes though, the canyons are kind of being limited in services, which is what we need to discuss a little bit as part of this program today. But for Magna, for Kearns, Renee, you just look through a few of the other ones. We're basing these off of the middle of the zone 2 for these service areas. And so the timing is being planned based on those particular service area sites. So say this one real quick if you don't mind, Renee. So this is kind of the model that we're looking at. So we've worked with Southern County Parks and Rec. We've received their permission. I've been in communication with a lot of our partner cities. I recently presented to the respective councils, and they've been in support of these. And I've also been sharing this information with board members. And so what we're doing is based on those 3 days of Rookford staffed public drop-off events, we've identified a location, logistics, planning, and we're planning to then have those from Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so 3 days throughout the week, from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. And these will be largely managed through an online reservation system that will actually be, the information will be included on future postcards that we send out. It'll be on our website. We're working on some advertising for this as well. But we're looking to allocate, so each of those 3 days has 6 hours. We're looking to allocate up to 30 residential loads per hour. So basically a vehicle every 2 minutes coming through with us staffing. The residents will likely have to unload those materials themselves, so we limit liability and damages, et cetera. But our team will be loading those into various other containers, launching these rear load trucks and hauling those off on rotation. So the way we're going to spread out and make sure this is equitable for these cities, these areas this year is that, so first and foremost, when a general access zone opens, zone 1 to agree, this will also open for that restrictive zone. And so each zone, so zone 1, for example, opens up, let's say on April 30th. That zone will be allocated to fill in up to 10 reservations per hour, 10 of those 30 time slots, because there's typically 3 zones in these areas. So hopefully I'm explaining this well, but those will open up based on general access. So early bird will get the container. General access will get a container if there's availability, but there'll also be early bird and general access given the option to sign up for the self-haul public drop-off at these events as well. And so this is intended to just be, this year to where we can plan this, to staff it effectively, to have enough time to safely execute this, and to ensure that residents are aware of the times and limitations of what can be brought, what cannot be brought. We clean these areas up on a daily basis. This is what we've done this year to really try to supplement the additional communities that require or have asked for on a lot of occasions additional services for their bulk waste. And so we didn't plan it for Cottonwood or White City Sandy. For predominantly is based on the timing. We just don't have enough time to really punch those out. But I think we're seeing the 25% increase in the containers per day should offset that. And I think we actually were calling residents for Cottonwood Heights because there was still reservation slots that were not actually filled up because we actually offered more. Some actually had to reach out and request if they wanted them. So again, the whole intent is to maximize our services this year, better meet the needs, and we're providing these supplemental offerings this year, as a result to offer those services. Questions, comments about what I've discussed thus far?
Impressive you could throw this all together within the last 6 months. Kudos. Yeah. Good job.
Thank you. And so, let's talk about the canyons next, and then we'll continue on to,
Can I ask you one quick question?
yes,
How big are the containers?
they are 14 yards, the scrap containers. They're just seven.
First one is one container.
Rows.
Are they filling this up?
Not in most cases. In past years, we were hauling on average, I think the entire year of 2025, the tons per container was 0.79, so much less than the actual capacity in these containers. Yes.
So,
That leads, I think, to what we want to do next year, very well.
And then the trailers are 18 yards, so most containers like this in a larger program are 20 yard, 30 yard, and 40 yard containers. So the trucks that we operate, we lease from Suffolk County, but they're only able to haul a smaller size, 14 yard containers. So we don't have the capacity to run 30 containers, 40 yard containers. So to be for like a larger cleanup event, we just don't have those assets.
just trying to get an idea of spatial.
Right. Okay. And then the trailers that we haul are 18 yards. Those have to be hauled behind a truck and stuff down to it, pulling that trailer as well. So Emigration Canyon and Bright, we have a very similar kind of plan this year. And I've been working with board member Griffith and Zeusman to plan this. And so historically, the canyons were serviced throughout the entirety of the scrap season with the goal of providing 10% of residents per day. And it was managed that way because we had the fee-based trailer program, we had the fee-based container program, which folks would sign up for in addition to the regular scrap services. So we had a year-round driver operating and providing those services, and we could operate that throughout that 6 months of the scrap season. So this year, since we've shifted those resources, we have more limitations in that. And so historically, where the canyons were given the service 6 months out of the year on an intermittent basis, this year we've identified a specific month in which we're providing those services. And so for Emigration Canyon, the month is essentially the month of May. Service dates of May 4th to 29th. The chart shows the postcard mailing dates, the website reservation dates. And so historically, we were able to leave those trailers for a period of multiple days. Again, these are larger containers. These are 18 yards as opposed to the 14-yard scrap container. But now with this plan, how we've had to shift this is that we have to remove those similarly to scrap, the subsequent business day, the next business day following the delivery. And so given our goal of servicing 10%, which likely, I guess I could presume that it hasn't been meeting expectations for our member cities or our other cities. We need to increase that, but with 10% a year, if we're delivering 3 containers a day per Emigration, we're a little bit below that 10% for this calendar year. We also know that the canyons have more trees, they're mountainous, there's more fire mitigation needs, there are additional, in some cases, flood risks for them as well. So that's the plan for Emigration. And if you go to the next slide, please, Renee. Brighton, we looked at and providing the service in the month of August. So the month of August will be Brighton with the very exact same degree of 3 trailers per day. We're dedicating a driver for this and pulling them off of our scrap program to do this. But providing those services outside of these timeframes, we don't have the staffing or the resources or in some cases the flexibility or the ability to charge those services. So that's how we're tackling and kind of attacking this year's scrap season with a lot of enhancements, a lot of flexibility and some late adjustments to really hopefully maximize our services. Originally, we talked about immigration having a similar central drop-off event, but we haven't really found the optimal location for that, or whether the residents have the means and methods of doing that. Something we can certainly work on later this year, possibly, or in a subsequent year as well. But there's still that, clearly there's not a one-size-fits-all. And even Board Holton has spoken about it, kind of heights, they have steep driveways, some that are up to the mountain, and so even a curbside model or even a container-based model in their driveway doesn't fit their needs in some cases as well. So give it a pause and if there's any questions or feedback. So I think the next step for looking at, next step is looking at the path forward.
But just to confirm, these dates, this information is all planned and we can start sharing it publicly with our councils and residents.
Yep. Unless we need to make adjustments or something, but yes, we've cleared the location with Salt Lake County Parks and Rec. We're actually planning for these events. The first central drop off will be in Magna that first week of June 2nd through the 4th of the fall. So.
And we're working on a specific city advertisement. We'll be able to send it off to Magna, and Kern will be next. Ready to post on your social media.
So, and then this is also, we talked about this earlier today already, is now what we're actually planning to implement May 1st. And we're actually working on a easy to use online template so you can actually request the pickup by commodity type, by quantity, by service area, et cetera. Providing this year-round specialty collections for tires, mattresses, appliances with Freon, and then regular appliances. So hot water heaters, washer dryers, stovetop range, et cetera. All these materials we're actually working out a lot of the plans for them. And I think we're ready, we're pretty much ready to go with some final pieces. We're working on a couple of contracts. All these materials will be ultimately recycled to the maximum extent possible. We're in a contract with the Freon removal specialty company to remove the Freon. And then ultimately those appliances will go to a metal scrap yard for recycling. The mattresses, we're contracting with a mattress recycler. And then the tires will go to a facility, GSL recycling. We're working on a contract with them as well. So we are really excited to introduce this program and just have been working out some various items so we can really implement it and see how this program demands are met. And also looking at for next year, what things might we want to add to this program. We're already hearing about pouches. I'm sure people want the option for a big screen TV to be removed and things like that as well. So this does not mean a giant truck's coming down your street like a regular trash truck. We're actually using our container and bin team to schedule these pickups. Right now we're planning to schedule those weekly on Thursdays, depending on where those locations are at. So it'll be a smaller truck where we come and collect these, bring them back to our yard and centrally stage those until we have a full container and then haul them to those recycling facilities. So we're again maximizing efficiencies and not wasting a bunch of time taking individual trips.
That's fantastic. I have 2 mattresses in a box for me. Just let me show you the start.
Well, one thing we also, there's another flyer. We have 2 flyers and we're actually doing some Facebook posts this week. Really trying to get the word out on this. Mattresses, we've done some research and we have heard concerns from our staff, and we are going to be asking that they're banned at the time of pickup. Maybe a little bit of a hindrance. We're going to look at maybe we can buy bulk mattress bags, and maybe when there's a request come in, if our team is in the area servicing a bin, it can be like, ever played like the newspaper video game and throw the newspaper out the window, something they used to have in communities. But maybe we could even offer to deliver the bag, so the resident can put it in a bag as well, or they have to pay for it.
How big are the bags? Is that something where you just mail them?
that probably costs us more. Well, there's twin size, full size, queen can, right, so, but mattresses, we have the, yeah, so it doesn't go there, but I've heard, when you get rid of an old mattress, from when you bought it, it's like, there's like 7 pounds added to it, it's like skin cells.
I think we can, when you have the mattress be designed.
Yes, so, we may want to look at this next year. But the fees were included here are meant to incur full cost recovery and our administrative costs for managing materials. You know, you can take these materials direct to a landfill or Salt Lake County, for example, and they'll probably charge you a few dollars less. Transport in the tire rate is $4. So this is including our administrative fees. Right. And so, yeah. And so if we can, provide the bags or offset those costs, so let's look at this next year and see how we can adjust that, but we're looking at how to kind of handle the bag mattress issue as well. So that's all of what we're doing this year, which I, as board member Barbieri mentioned, is a lot in a period of time. So we've made a lot of adjustments, a lot of enhancements, new services that we're quite excited to bring forward. And I just want to remind folks here on this very top part of this slide here, is that part of the, and Renee mentioned this a little bit, the bulky waste comparison. So the non-container based programs, they do not accept a variety of materials that we are currently accepting in the scrap program. So that's mostly construction debris. But it's also the heavy material, the rocks, the dirt, sod, asphalt shingles, kitchen remodels, granite countertops, all the things that aren't really acceptable from a curbside perspective. And this is, I think, where there's some gaps and opportunities to provide possibly in the future a reinstate the fee-based service if we go to a curbside model. So I just wanted to point that out because based on our container program, we would not be able to accept those items curbside. It would be way too difficult to handle, they're super heavy. You can't, load up dirt into different containers like this as well too. So there's some variability in that, but also curbside, there's other risks. So plate glass, mirrors, for example, come to mind. So those would not be acceptable materials that would really constitute a construction debris type thing in a curb. So if you go to the next slide, Renee, we've largely talked about this as what we're considering for next year is going to this predominantly curbside bulky waste model, which would be managed by kind of what's shown in those pictures. So that's kind of a smaller front end loader with a bucket and a claw or grapple to grab materials on the top picture, and then the bottom would be loading into those rear load trucks. So we've already talked about us being able to get 12, in some cases 14 individual scrap containers. Obviously they're not full, but into a single rear load truck. And so we probably could pack more in some cases, depending on the density and the composition of the material as well. And so this would, in essence, really help to maximize our ability to service. There's of course concerns, restrictions, et cetera, parking cars on the side of the street. The stormwater concerns of course are a part there as well. But going to this type of model could in essence be done longer than the 6-month scrap season, possibly year round. It would really eliminate our need to rely on seasonal drivers, which right now we're budgeted for 12. We've actually overfilled those because we're underfilling some of our permanent driver positions currently. It would also eliminate our need to lease the 10+ hook lift trucks that we're currently leasing from the county, which would cost us additional money, and it would also reduce that corresponding mileage, fuel, repair and maintenance costs as part of that. So we did get board approval to support to go forward and order a new one of those rear load trucks that should show in the bottom of this picture, which should be in next year as well. But we'd also want to make sure we had support from our partner cities understand how we're gonna manage the canyon communities as part of this program, if it would still be probably a trailer or a container-based program, what that model looks like, and then of course a large-scale education outreach campaign. So if we were to go this method, my goal would be to provide the service no less than twice a year for each community, as opposed to just once a year. Be much more, it would be a structured process. It would be based on some sort of a reservation system that is optimized based on the review that we're completing, the research we're doing as well. But also in some of those areas and some of those materials that are not acceptable under a program such as this, the existing scrap containers and the hook lift trucks that we own currently could still be used to, provide a fee-based service. It would help us to better have cost recovery for construction debris, remodels, people want to remove those dirt and other sod and gravel from their property, roofing replacements, et cetera. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. And then one final slide, and I'll stop talking momentarily, hopefully for a while. So what we would need to look at this further is basically looking at the impacts of setting up this program. So I already mentioned serviceability impacts. The goal would be minimum 2 times per year of curbside service. It would be structured based on rotation through the communities, of course. Salt Lake City can do this because they're one centralized service area where we're kind of, as you've seen on that, we're in different areas throughout the different time of the year and the week for regular collection services. So we pretty much already understand this, the capital cost of standing up this type of program. But we also need to look at in more detail, what would be the cost savings of eliminating scrap in the valley, being the container program, but also how to handle the canyons and other challenging areas that we've discussed as well today. But also those cost savings, but what would be the costs of a curbside program and what would be those staff rates? And compared to 12 seasonal drivers plus 2 permanent drivers and all the supervisors, those would largely be probably 2 teams of 2 or 3, mostly full-time permanent employees providing the service. But again, as we've discussed in the past, instead of hauling 7,500 individual containers to a landfill or transfer station, we're talking about reducing that travel time, the haul time, and maximizing our tonnage and our serviceability in these containers. And so, as part of that, that's the direction that this board decides that we want to move forward, of course, taking into consideration some of the more unique service areas and challenging areas. But if we can provide scrap service bulky waste service 2 times or more a year, the landfill voucher program may no longer be necessary or appropriate. So, to my understanding, the landfill voucher program is based on Woodford's historic ties to Salt Lake County. We used to be a department in the county, then as a special service district, still tied to the county. But we have no ownership of the county landfill or the transfer station. So in other integrated solid waste districts that I've worked for in the past, we had ownership or received revenue from the landfill. So we had these vouchers or free disposal because we had that interest in that facility. So right now, I think the landfill vouchers have continued because those landfill vouchers are used to offset the limitations to the current container-based scrap. So if we were to go to a curbside bulky program, I guess the question is, would the voucher program continue to be necessary or appropriate for Woodford to offer that in addition to the bulky waste?
So Evan, I have a question for the board, going back to the previous slide that you had. I don't remember if it was last week or the meeting before, we asked people to go back to their councils and kind of take the temperature on how supportive different communities would be of this kind of approach. So I'm just wondering the different feedback that people have seen, either like officially in their council or just anecdotally. Is this a program that you think people in your communities would be supportive of? I mean, I think Evan has done a fantastic job of going over the benefits of that program, but it is a big change. So, yes.
Yes, I brought it back to my council after we had the initial meetings. And our community council in general is in favor of this because of the concerns I brought up in the past. And that is, we share driveways. When you put those trailers in our driveways, it's not just one resident liable for what goes in the driveway itself and everything. There's 2 residents that are now having a garbage trailer in their driveway. So this kind of puts it back onto the road that everybody's been asking for. And we kind of need that where we're at. So there's been a good response to this where we are. And the voucher thing for us would be completely moot because we have our own living room transfer for vouchers. I wouldn't have any input on that.
So I would say for holiday, people were, supportive at looking at it and seeing, as far as our city management was concerned, and this is a separate question I want to get to later, dealt with issues like stormwater and all of that. So we can get to that later, but there were some concerns, but overall, I would say our support from us.
Yeah, I don't think there are any additional concerns.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else have a chance to?
We have some concerns in the city, some of our administration feels like that. You get people leaving things out that you can't take, and then they get sat there, then we have to involve, code enforcement and things like that. But I think that can be resolved if we can get some people on board with the whole idea of things just being dumped in the road. My question is, I got thinking about a lot of this. We took the scrap trailers off of the street because we couldn't because it was just too dangerous and people were running by and just dumping everything on the street, right? And so we put it in individual driveways so that we could eliminate those food bulky dumpsters, people dumping things. So what's the difference of just putting the scrap containers back on the street where people want them and they were happy with them? If we are allowing bulk waste on the street, why can't we have a scrap container on the street?
Awesome.
I think that's a good question. I mean, it sounds like at least what Evan's proposal is that has to do, I guess we could do that. The question I think would have to do with this program decreases cost significantly. I mean, what would you say to that, Evan? Because I think it's a good question.
Correct.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, decreases cost.
Right.
The question has come up, well, if you're gonna allow bulk, why don't you just put the trailers back on the street?
So this is, it's a cost and efficiency, but also maximizing our ability to service it. And so with the containers and our reliance on seasonal workers and drivers to individually haul those, we are bound by the limitations of properties that can get a container. With a curbside bulky program that's being hauled and packed and maximize the tonnage with a rear load truck, we can offer every single property along the streets. So there would be no need to have people rush to the container in the street, put all of their junk around it. That's created a ton of work for staff to do that. So they would get picked up on their curb with restrictions, right? Different size of pile, where to place it, where not to place it. And then we would make sure that it's, you know, there are concerns with damaging mailboxes and in-ground utilities and things like that as well. So I have to make sure that we're, you know, really aware of those items. So really it's maximizing our efficiencies and our abilities to collect it. So by going containers back to the street, it's just continuing with the problem that we've always had, is not being able to meet the service needs for bulky waste.
I'm gonna push back a little bit because we didn't have complaints about the scrap program until we moved it off of the street. So I think it was meeting people's needs.
Okay.
When it was just put in the neighborhoods randomly, people filled them up, they carted them away. And I'm completely, pathetic to the fact that people would just come and dump it by the trailers as well. I think people are just gonna go, wait a minute, you told us we couldn't put scrap on the street because it was a liability, but now we can just dump stuff on the street. And that's not a liability. And I understand all of the answers. I just not perception.
You're thinking ahead, which is great because
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll second that. I think I never heard a complaint when they were just placed. Administratively different issue, but from residents.
I'll be honest, the only complaint we did get when it was on the streets was, there's two on this street and one on this street. I mean, the smallest of complaints, but we didn't get the same type of complaints we get now.
I agree.
And I agree with you because it is difficult to continue to go back to your community and say, we're doing this because of this, and then suddenly we're telling them, just kidding, now we're doing that. It's hard for them to understand. It's kind of like when we were talking earlier about the different services you're receiving, and then you're trying to tell like every other week recycling because we're saving money, and they're going, but wait, you're cutting services. So it kind of goes hand in hand with that, just being able to, how are you gonna explain it to them? I agree with you. So dump your stuff on the curb. Everybody's gathering it. One is that you come and you just take the trailer, and the other is you have a skid or whatever.
So,
Right, and you're prepared for it to be on the street where before you weren't. I'm just wondering if that's different. And I like the cost savings, but yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, it seems that this is a significant cost savings, and I know some people who've been on the board longer know that like, to go back to the old scrap model that, I mean, I think we all love, is not even just even more expensive, it's like cost prohibitive.
Yes.
So, so to me, this feels closer to that, so it's less that this is, a good system and more that we have a real messaging communication problem in implementing this, because of what you're mentioning. Do you say that that's fair? A fair assessment of things? Because I agree, I think that's exactly what we're gonna hear, so we're going to really, really work on and make sure that, that we have good messaging and address those concerns, hopefully. What about other communities, where are we hearing? Councilor Milford, you guys are on the board,
Yeah, I brought it up and didn't hear.
one way or the other?
Very neutral.
Okay.
We're not as excited about Trump, but yeah. I didn't hear any opposition, I think, and I think that, at least in my community, for sure, right? Like I remember when they were around more, and so it will feel like an expansion. It will be an expansion of services, which I think is always fun.
And maybe that's a good way to frame it, is an expansion, because instead of, you get a couple of dumpsters in your neighborhood, every single person gets their stuff picked up, and you don't have to, walk it down the street to the dumpster. I mean, that could be a good framing marketing approach.
Well, and it's like Evan said too, it allows everybody to be able to participate.
Yeah.
But I think you brought up the concern earlier of how do we police it, like as a city or a town? I think that's another concern that kind of goes along with communication, but also you're just gonna have people that do that regardless. So, I mean, I guess it would have to fall into code enforcement.
So before we get to that, because I think that's a huge issue, did any concerns with current magnet as far as like basic support? Or are you guys?
This is the first we haven't had this brought up in our. So
Well, keep us.
I'll bring it up.
Okay.
I've had kind of the same feedback. My biggest amount that I'm getting back though is they desperately want monthly bulky.
Oh.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, hopefully where you pay for what I'm trying to say, the fee for service, maybe that would help me. Yeah, which would be good. But because that's the other concern that we had is a lot of the code enforcement, and along with that stormwater issues. So my parents live in Sandy, and they had this type of program there, and truly it's like, you'll pry it out of our cold dead hands, they love it. But we had just had this discussion, and I was there hauling stuff out, and I was like, well, we can't leave it where the stormwater goes, and my mom's like, it's fine, don't worry about it. I'm like, just was in a meeting about this, and so what are communities doing? What are the proposals to address like enforcement and compliance and all those things?
I think it's another partnership opportunity to work with MSD and some of our other partner cities. You know, Taylorsville has their own code compliance departments. But it would be a huge education and outreach initiative. I know Sandy City has a really helpful diagrams on their website, and we would basically, in that comparison that Renee's developed, is taking the best of the best out of there, forming this program, bringing back to this board that more information. So we're actually focused right now on this year's scrap season, but we're thinking about everything else on the side, where we need to do additional analysis on these items. We bring that back to this board at a time, but really, I think it's a partnership opportunity with various cities and the MSD in some cases as well.
Yeah, because it's just as important as the entire process, because it's going to put entities here to be taking care of both of those, and those are both really big concerns. Stormwater and code enforcement all lands on us.
Yeah, well, that's exactly right,
People
because
want to know what's going on.
I would imagine
Wait,
some of the complaints will go to customer service, but even then, customer service would then route that back to the city. And so I mean, our code enforcement officers are already like run ragged, especially in the summer. And so yeah, that is.
especially when you're working with all the municipalities that are functioning under code enforcement with the municipal service district, because that is not, it's not a large office of code enforcement to manage that many municipalities, especially if you're doing this twice a year or for several days out of a month. Kind of have to prioritize what code enforcement you want done at that point.
And we can support that. So right now, we actually send letters. That's a historical practice, but for if residents call in and complain that their neighbors didn't take in their trash cans, we send that letter. So there's a lot of other possible enforcement actions that we could support.
That we could take on instead of putting it onto the cities? Because that's the question.
Yeah, as potentially.
That's a big ask.
Yeah, that's a big ask on the district, but it's also a big ask on the cities to take that up.
It absolutely is, because you're asking paid employees that we're already paying to take care of your enforcement.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it.
So to me, that's a piece that probably requires a lot more looking into to really.
So that's a big potential. It really depends, you know, so even the scrap season, we're dealing with our own enforcement just by even the cost. So we are pulling propane tanks from scrap containers that could, you know, they're pressurized hazardous air containers, right? We're pulling out refrigerators and mattresses and all the other things last week they were talking about, the paint, buckets of paint and chemicals. So these things that, if these were at the curb for a bulk waste curbside program, we would see it and we just wouldn't collect it. Right, but it also, we'd have to really structure this in a way that, okay, this zone, your pickup week is this week, do not place anything at the curb. Some cities are 72 hours in advance, so they're not leaving stuff out of your rent, for example. And then our drivers that are in all these neighborhoods on a weekly basis, we will rely on their eyes and ears and count on them to report back to our operations and our customer service team if there's non-compliance and other piles of things that are being done. So it'd be a concerted, collaborative effort that would support this, in addition to what we discussed, but also getting support from partner cities and in some cases, code compliance departments.
I was just gonna say, and maybe, just running through different bullet points with certain areas that have smaller, more narrow roads when it comes to things like, by fire. Because those emergency services are usually the ones that have the most to say whenever you want to try to use the street for anything. Because even, I am one of the people who have been on this board, even when we were putting them in the road, we had I think one of the only other kickbacks we had was from UFA. Because of the narrow streets and creating obstacles in case of an emergency. So I mean, fire hydrants, things like that are a lot of consideration.
And maybe,
Working with them, maybe just to find out what their recommendation
I know Sandy City is 3 feet away from the curb, but I think there's other things to look at to where this is the Sandy City one. I don't think we would propose that. We propose at the curb or before the curb. past the curb in the street.
And how would this, just a question, because I don't know, how does this work on state roads?
Yeah, that's where there's so much variability in the canyon communities and things.
We have a large population that is directly on a state road, and you don't have, and I know that the easements or the third side is really regulated.
Yeah, so definitely a lot to evaluate. A lot to research and,
I like it, but those are all the.
and, you know, previously here with Flagstaff, Arizona, we managed a curbside bulky program exactly like this. It wasn't even reservation based. There were 5 zones that were collected once every 5 weeks, which given our service area, that would be very, very difficult to do. But people didn't know their zone, so there were just piles of junk at the curb here. Just, it was not, so that's why the structuring would be so important, the planning. We want people to actually request the pickup, but we would still pick it up if they didn't request, so we can plan. Walkways on the curb, we used a similar type of machinery as well, with very few property damages. Essentially, have water meters there, fences and mailboxes, and you know, it's different in each neighborhood that we service. And if there's a parked car, then we need to track it and try to go back the next day to collect that material. Yeah. That's it.
How are you?
This was the last slide.
Scrap and letter. What format? And in order for us to, it's a pretty hard to rectify. Particularly interest, getting thinking of put them on the given the having staff day or email back to the council, meeting with citizens, generate those ideas and as presented this great plan, great look forward. And I think that we're gonna be able to see that impact these seasons go on the process itself. So I should say over the last 6 years, maybe just every year, it's always some variation, trying to ensure that I think this is in, I think it creates a program that benefit everyone. We have Renee, I think, here, or no? Renee, here we go. Who's who are magic? That what is that really? See, we get you.
Approve your picture. Thank you, Lori.
Great notes.
My 10.
Yeah, so 310, there's not a lot of information in the packet here. Razor would make that a little bit bigger on the screen possibly. So there's 2 topics of discussion here. Is one, we've already discussed to a degree today, is the concept of going from a weekly to every other week curbside recycle collection. And the discussion had kind of centered around this line of service financial assessment that we're still planning to solicit this year and have a financial consultant provide some analysis as part of that. But the other piece on the every week recycle is that it would not be a resident by residence decision. It would likely be something we would ask the city, each respective city, to decide on which level of service they would like. So ideally, would pull your residents, and a city council would decide on which level of service will be provided for that. So we have to look at the impacts. I know when I was in Arizona, the city of Tucson went from weekly to every other week recycle. And when I asked them about how that impacted the program, They said they actually did start receiving, lower volume, lower tonnage of materials as well. So there could be that unforeseen negative consequence of having less materials.
People are just throwing it in their garbage.
Right, just less materials getting recycled as a whole. That's just one example. Tucson is a fairly large metropolitan city with different types of materials. They have a very robust bulky program. That's part of this analysis that we looked at Tucson, Phoenix, and other metro areas as well. So the other item on this list, and happy to take feedback on the considerations for the weekly versus bi-weekly consideration, but it's, how does Woodford continue to adapt? What opportunities do we have? The curbside green waste program, we have seen a consistent increase in new customers, but that increase seems to be dialing down. So we've kind of almost hit to, in essence, like where we're maximum saturation of program participation. We are seeing increased revenues. Tonnages are kind of remaining stable on this program, but this material does take us less to get rid of at the landfill. I mentioned earlier that there's a possibility that Woodford could start its own composting-based program. But really, how do we continue to grow this program or incentivize this program, or do we want this program to remain as is, as a subscription-based, or to certain cities that have a higher need for fire mitigation or green waste removal? This is for smaller material, but do certain areas or certain cities want to see that service provided to all of their residents, for example? So that would be something that a city council would have to vote on. But just wanted to kind of see what is our possibilities of making adjustments to these programs. One thing I do want to point out, since board members, Stringham, I'm forgetting your last name for some reason. I know I have your last name. Is that with Harriman withdrawing from Wasatch Front, they have like 1,200 Greenway subscribers. Southwest Unincorporated has maybe 5, and Cumberland has maybe 3 Greenway subscribers. So continuing to offer the service in those areas probably doesn't make sense operationally or from a cost perspective.
It doesn't, but we were just talking about this in our breakout, and the amount, I want to know the amount of people who have 2 black cans. Because I have an extra black can that I pay how much for? $70 startup, $19 a month for, and the only thing that goes in it is grass clippings and green waste.
Oh.
Because I don't have an opportunity to get green waste. So there might be 3, but that's because nobody else can sign up.
But Tess, I'll even tell you, and a lot of neighbors had.
And we didn't push it.
You should actually look at these numbers sometime. Who had a green waste bin, who then got rid of it, got a second garbage bin. Because that's happened all because it is cheaper.
We have 3
It's
people.
cheaper to put it in the landfill than a green bin.
We have 3, so we actually haven't even been able to really get any type of good information off of 3. So we also haven't advertised and pushed for that program either, because what's the point? And then
Is it per month?
it's been kind of on the forecast. And $12 is less than the black can. Black can is
Mind you, you pay annually that 12, correct?
It's billed monthly, but it is an annual, yes, recurring charge.
But you don't get annual service.
Correct.
But it's like from November to March that they don't do it, right?
Right.
Yep, right.
But point being, it's more money, that's,
But it's with your black.
We can expand the time frame. Other cities run through December 31st. We changed
But
the.
with your black can, with your black can, you're paying 12 months out of the year, and it's 19 plus the $70 startup.
Yeah, gotcha.
So if you're doing green waste, it's 12 a month, and you're also not having that period of time during the winter that you're using it. So for people who realistically only use their secondary black can for things like spring cleanup or fire mitigation, because we do have that same issue where I live, then you are filling those cans in the summertime. And that's primarily what we do at our house. We're not, maybe Christmas. Christmas may be the only other time we're like, oh, we are happy we have that second black can. most of it's going in recycle, right? But, you know, we do use those 2 cans during that time, otherwise it is summer. It's summertime that we're using it, but it's not offered in our area, so we have to purchase that big box.
And if we could have, you know, a certain threshold of subscriptions for that, then we could continue to justify it for conversion and sense on incorporated. I think Momentum, they do the glass recycling. They are actually starting to offer curbside glass recycling in both Kearns and Magna, June 1st.
Right, we talked about that in our breakout as well, and it's a pass-through. So it's not necessarily even adding more money for Woodward. It's not an additional cost for Woodward, it's a pass-through. So if you do add as a central location to Momentum. So we were just, that's kind of our whole breakout. That's really interesting to see how the different areas utilized that.
But I think Momentum wanted like 10% of households that could subscribe as like a minimum threshold or something.
Like 75.
Yeah. But yeah, that's separate from the central glass recycling. That's curbside, and so we administer, we bill it. Momentum does the collections, and I think we mark it up maybe a quarter for, it's not even that. So it's covering our administrative overhead costs for that service. So I think we know we're looking at bi-weekly recycle, but I guess as for the green waste, just want to bring this information forward. If there's any recommendations or direction on further pursuit of this program, growing it, keeping it as is.
When you say you're looking at bi-weekly recycling, you come back with us with an actual number of how much people's bills would increase to decide.
$15 to go.
Okay. That's all we've got for this item. We can move on to the final breakout.
Well, I was saying, based upon time constraints, that these items, again, this materials that you can take home, discuss with your council, and that the May meeting, this would be a time that we can slide this in the May meeting, to cover this, because again, this is an opportunity for you to take materials home. You'll have council meetings to present this, and then in the meeting on the 18th, we can run down, we can put that on the agenda and work that in as part of discussion on what the proposals here might be. Recap, I don't know if I can say.
So we would do the breakout, as you suggest we're doing the breakout at a different meeting?
Yes.
Okay,
We'll cover that in our next
meeting.
Okay. I have to say, from what I can see and where this is an opportunity, because again, at our normal meetings, all of those, we try to pack in as much stuff and discuss as many things as we can. But this does provide, again, a free flow of ideas. And specifically, you know, we went around the room, everybody, their demographics are completely, or not. They are different. Yes, yeah, they are different, and each of the services, again, are provided in somewhat different manners. If you have other questions, desire, more information that we want to throw out for the next meeting, I think that's great for us to grab on that. And I want to get our thank you in the entire staff, except for Catherine Coffee. Catherine Coffee. But we do appreciate, and we'll, again, see you next month. So motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. It's
Ready?
It's still good stuff. We're not getting.
As far as it's fine. It's all the concept.
Let's